the president of Korea, announces the impending end of the world, following a catastrophe in Japan, where an asteroid impact releases a virus that transforms the population into voracious zombies. As the apocalypse commences, widespread panic breaks out, leaving the public paralyzed, with confusion regarding where to seek safety. However, one individual, Seo-ho, is fully prepared for this disaster. He possesses a secure sanctuary in an alternate dimension, and has been anticipating the opportunity to combat the undead several months prior. Seong-ho and his friends participated in Asura, a virtual reality survival game, known for its extreme difficulty. The game was so challenging that the majority of its player base eventually quit. Seong-ho was abandoned by his party members, who betrayed him by never logging in again. Consequently, he continued to play and stream the game solo, defeating various monsters, and rising to become the top-ranked player. Eventually growing weary of this lifestyle, he removed his gaming gear and deleted his public stream archives, focusing on his career as a chef. Seong-ho developed an interest in a specific female customer in a moment of playfulness. He vocalized the command for a status window in the real world and was shocked to see an actual blue interface manifest before his eyes. The screen displayed his statistics, identical to those from the game, with one exception: a new skill labeled Private Portal. Upon testing this new ability, Seong-ho summoned a warp gate, large enough for a human to pass through. He struggled to process the dangerous implications of this discovery, realizing that, if elements of the game were manifesting in reality, the media responsible for starting the apocalypse must also be approaching. Searching the internet, he frantically discovered an article predicting the asteroid's impact. Despite this, he remained in denial that the game's events were unfolding in real life. Staring at the portal, he acknowledged that the combination of the asteroid report and the existence of the gate confirmed something was terribly wrong. He hesitated, debating whether he should enter the portal. Lacking superpowers, a romantic partner, a plan, or funds, he considered taking the risk. Ultimately, after some reflection, he picked up a nearby ladle and inserted it into the portal to gauge what lay on the other side. After retrieving a scoop of soil, he realized the destination was not a labyrinth level from the game. While this was a positive sign, he began to wonder if the portal merely transported him to a different location on Earth. Having packed supplies for the journey, he motivated himself to finally step through. Once inside, Jongo discovered a beautiful landscape, completely devoid of urban structures. He immediately noticed that the climate was significantly colder than what he was accustomed to. Checking his phone and finding no signal, he deduced that he was trapped in an isolated region, far from civilization. Realizing the severity of his potential isolation, he took out a marker and labeled a nearby tree with the number 0. Marking the tree proves to be a strategic decision, ensuring he does not lose his bearings. During the exploration, he begins his trek, but the physical exertion quickly takes a toll on him. The forest seems limitless, with no end in sight. Just as he begins to wish for something interesting to happen, a creature nearby fixes its gaze upon him. Suddenly it leaps forward with predatory speed, terrifying the protagonist. Fortunately, the animal reveals itself to be a stunning valley deer, rather than a carnivorous monster. Notably, the system automatically identifies the unique creature, providing confirmation that this location is indeed a realm separate from Earth. The deer stares at him briefly, before bolting away in silence. Seong-ho finds the creature's abrupt departure strange, but he is relieved by its lack of aggression. However, he acknowledges that his situation could become dire if he were to encounter violent animals, like monkeys or boars. Another significant detail is that the valley deer never existed in the Sora game. Upon his arrival, he develops a strong intuition that this realm operates on survival mechanics. Wielding a blade, he advances, steeling himself against anything that might jump out at him. Up to this point, he has remained in denial regarding the disaster heading to end humanity. But just as he is about to give up, he makes a discovery. He spots a glowing sun apple, a mystical fruit, and plucks it from a tree. After briefly wondering if it is safe to eat, he takes a bite and experiences an immediate transformation. The system notifies him that his stamina has been restored, as his body emits a golden radiance, replicating the exact effects of the sun apple juice from the game. With this final confirmation, he is fully convinced that a terrible event is imminent. Additionally, he notices he is standing near goblin feces, indicating he must exercise extreme caution. Seong-ho sighs anxiously, attempting to boost his morale. But despite his earlier skepticism, he now accepts that the end of the world is approaching. After experiencing the portal's effects, he exits the gate and returns to his original world to brainstorm solutions. He is determined to be ready for the coming apocalypse. His first step is to review all his gameplay footage and store it on a personal hard drive. Conveniently, having streamed every session allows him to easily access this data, a resource he never anticipated using for such a purpose. News reaches him regarding the asteroid's impact. The destruction of Japan is scheduled to begin in 32 days, marking the start of the apocalypse. He decides to use this time to prepare, knowing that the game was plagued by incredibly harsh mechanics. The most absurd and problematic of these features was a condition known as the Iron Death disease. This specific phenomenon caused the corrosion and destruction of every piece of metal on Earth. Buildings crumbled into dust, inadvertently aiding the zombie swarm. Just hours after the event occurred, with the obliteration of metal in modern society, humanity was effectively sent back to the Stone Age. Although the Iron Death disease eventually subsided within the game, the primary issue was that it persisted for a full year. However, the approaching plague did not concern the protagonist, much as he possessed a secure workaround via his private portal, a benefit of his recently obtained trait. Sungo operates under the strong assumption that the disease cannot traverse the portal. Concluding his analysis, he gathers all his savings to purchase high-grade equipment. Since he's effectively about to enter a real-life zombie survival scenario, he acquires all necessary gear and provisions. That night, while browsing online forums, Sung-ho feels disappointed, seeing the few individuals who are misusing their awakened powers for crime and self-indulgence when morning arrives. He purchases additional supplies to support his upcoming mission. On his return trip, he also buys a hunting bow as a precaution. Amidst these preparations, he faces a realization, wondering if he might be overthinking the situation. He considers that perhaps he is getting ahead of himself and acting too rashly. Nevertheless, he reasons that he can eventually earn back his savings, even if his fears prove unfounded. With his errands finished, he returns home and places a closing sign on his shop. While deep in thought, he is suddenly interrupted by a voice. A woman resembling Cha Hae-in from Solo Leveling asks with concern regarding the shop's closure. He informs her that it is merely for remodeling, leading her to speculate if he has struck it big and earned a lot of money. Seung-ho attempts to end the conversation by claiming he has work to do, but she abruptly stops him to ask something. However, she becomes flustered and fails to articulate her request, turning around to leave instead. Although curious about what she wanted to ask and aware he could have pressed for an answer, Seung-ho returns to his business. Inside, he vows to focus seriously on matters of importance, effectively choosing to ignore distractions to fully concentrate on his goals. He commands the portal to open. While reflecting on his gaming playstyle, he could be described as a playmaker or strategist, someone who enjoys utilizing tactics to clear stages. He was not a particularly powerful fighter, relying mostly on his intellect. The reason for this is simple. In Sora, gaining stats is a complex process. Stats are not acquired merely by leveling up. They are obtained only through hunting and exploration. Currently, Seung-ho is in the other realm, attempting to refine his archery skills. Lacking prior practice or instruction, he utilizes YouTube tutorials to teach himself. He adopts the correct stance and aims the weapon. His in-game experience is reflected in his demeanor. As he eventually releases the arrow flies through the air and successfully strikes the target board. Seung-ho is genuinely surprised by his own natural talent, briefly entertaining the notion that he might be a chosen one. However, the soreness in his hand quickly brings him back to reality, revealing that his physical strength is a significant weakness. Consequently, he resolves to prioritize working out to improve his endurance. With his basic preparations complete, he proceeds to the next phase of his plan. He identifies two immediate priorities: formulating a proper strategy for hunting monsters and constructing a secure home base for supply storage. Unfortunately, he is currently without weapons or provisions, as his orders are still in transit. In the meantime, he occupies himself by hunting for golden apples, finding an abundance of them through sheer luck. After marking several locations, he focuses on mentally preparing for the approaching apocalypse. This dedication to early preparation mirrors the strategy that allowed him to survive in Sura for so long. While scanning the area, Seung-ho discovers goblin excrement. He had been specifically searching for this sign with a particular theory in mind. Since goblins typically move in packs, the presence of a single isolated pile of waste suggests that a solitary goblin is nearby. Examining the evidence, he deduces that the creature is likely an outcast, Sunho recognizes this lone goblin as a perfect opportunity to gain experience, essentially a golden ticket, and resolves to hunt it down. As night falls, he continues his search. The sound of howling wolves indicates he is nearing the valley, and shortly after, he spots the very goblin he had been tracking. Concealing himself behind a tree, Sango observes that the creature is identical to its in-game counterpart. Although goblins are considered the lowest tier of monsters, usually armed only with spears and poison darts, they are infamous for torturing and mutilating their victims. This brutal nature is precisely why Sunho opted for a long-range weapon, like a bow, as his primary tool. Observing closely, he notes that the goblin appears old and is in poor physical condition. Seeing that it is unarmed, Sunho immediately readies his bow. He understands that maintaining his composure is key to securing the kill. He releases the arrow, which pierces the goblin's arm. Although he had aimed for the head, he is satisfied with the result. Attempting to capitalize on the injury, he prepares a second shot. However, the goblin reacts with surprising speed, throwing a stone with enough force to knock the bow from Sunho's hands. He realizes then that he is facing a mature and experienced combatant. Both adversaries prepare for close-quarters combat. Sunho readies his knife and attempts to slash at the goblin's flank. The experienced monster dodges the attack and delivers a hard blow to Sunho's kneecap. Escalating the fight, Sunho tackles the creature, forcing it onto its back on the ground. In this position, he holds a distinct advantage. Sunho drives the blade deep into the creature's chest, eliciting a scream of agony. Eventually, the light fades from its eyes. The first kill is a success, rewarding him with 2 points. He is momentarily stunned, struggling to believe that he actually managed to pull it off. Scanning the surroundings, he locates guaca powder and vegetable oil nearby. He recalls that in the game, combining these ingredients creates a healing ointment. However, his immediate priority is to dig a grave quickly. It is far too dangerous to leave the goblin corpse exposed, as the rest of the pack could discover it and track him down. Furthermore, abandoning the body is ill-advised because it could transform into a monster known as a bone creeper. Sungo then notices a pair of red trout nearby. His heart begins to race as he realizes he is in grave danger. The moment he shifts his gaze, he spots a terrifying owl-like monster looming over him. The narrative briefly shifts back to Sungo's past. As a player during his live streams, he compiled significant insights into the game, responding to donations from viewers who wanted deep dives into the lore. Sungo had thoroughly analyzed and explained his experiences with goblins and kobolds. While avoiding bone creepers was essential, he noted that the forest harbored 2 of the game's deadliest creatures, werewolves and owlbears. Owlbears are known to be highly territorial, playing a vital role in maintaining the balance of the monster ecosystem. Recalling his streaming days brings a sense of warmth to Seong-ho. He remembers a specific viewer named Bull Sungman, who was always supportive. Other viewers were relaxed but eccentric, such as one individual who persistently typed barking sounds in the chat. Sunho finds it strange that these pleasant memories are surfacing now. He wonders if it is a reaction to facing a creature of pure horror that threatens to end his life. Refusing to succumb to the situation, he interprets these memories as a signal to focus. Utilizing every second, he attempts to formulate a plan, well aware that owlbears are vicious predators, capable of ripping apart anything in their path. The creature's lack of immediate movement suggests it might not be particularly hungry at the moment. However, the most concerning factor is that they have trespassed into the territory of the red trout. Weighing all these variables, Sunho concludes there is likely only one method to escape this nightmare: pivoting to run. He reminds himself that mentally, he is still the expert player known as Kimbap Joa, even if his physical form is limited to the weaker physique of Kong Sunho. Gritting his teeth, Sunho challenges the monster, issuing a final declaration of his will to survive. The creature stares him down before initiating a terrifying first attack. While the owlbear is an exceptional nocturnal hunter, its primary weakness is direct sunlight. Having memorized the creature's attack patterns from the game, Sunho knows that proper execution is the only way to save his life. Matching the timing of the beast's strike, he executes a perfect evasion of the slash, while simultaneously devising a way to create a light source to frighten the monster. Bursting with speed, he sprints up the creature's massive arm, before finally whipping out a flashlight and blinding its eyes at point-blank range. This effect is so traumatic for a predator like the owlbear that it is rendered completely blind. The scene shifts to the protagonist lying in bed, As his alarm rings, he knows he must get up. Even though his body is incredibly sore from the previous night's events, Seong-ho had passed out immediately after returning home, with his last memory being his desperate flight after blinding the monster. As luck would have it, he had encountered the owlbear immediately after dealing with the goblin. Not wanting to deal with any more trouble, he attempts to rise to get something to eat. However, he falls to the floor with a thud, realizing that his legs are completely incapacitated from the excessive cardio. Fortunately, he still possesses the golden apples from the other realm. Junho grabs one and takes a bite, instantly rejuvenating his stamina through its magical effects. Finally feeling more alive than ever, he decides to go out and properly satisfy his hunger. After cleaning himself up, he runs into Mikyung again. She had come to a different restaurant to eat, and coincidentally encountered him. Although Seong-ho was not looking for company, she sits with him because she prefers having a meal partner. She hurriedly asks him if he has tried opening the status window. Her enthusiastic attitude makes Seong-ho realize that this was the topic she wanted to discuss previously but had hesitated to mention. Mikyung shows him a news report to assure him that the phenomenon is real, noting that some awakened players are already using their powers to steal money from others. Seong-ho is slightly startled by her confidence in asking such a direct question. He responds by lying, telling her that nothing appeared for him. Seong feels that keeping others in the dark about his status is the right move. His trade is strategic rather than combat-focused, meaning it is something he should utilize for his own advantage rather than sharing with others. At this moment, not even his personal safety is guaranteed. He reasons that if he reveals his hand to her, likening the situation to the danger of the lady in the red dress, things could end badly for him. It is a calculated strategic play. However, he remains intrigued as to why Mikyung is showing such intense interest in the subject of awakening. Then she surprises him. She hesitates before admitting that she had lied about something. Seong-ho assumes she has good intentions and reassures her that she is under no obligation to explain herself. He offers her words of encouragement, suggesting that there is still time before heading home shortly after their conversation concludes. Finally, his delivery packages arrive. The supplies he ordered have been delivered, alleviating his concerns about resources. He moves the bulk of the items to the rooftop, storing only the essential goods on the second floor. While preparing, he selects various items required for the day's objective, including gas mask suits and other necessary equipment. For this mission, he intends to secure a suitable location to serve as a hideout. Establishing a home base is crucial, which explains why he has equipped himself with an axe. Stepping through the portal, Seong-ho pursues his first lead. While previously searching for the elderly goblin, he had accidentally stumbled upon a cave. Remembering its coordinates, he travels to that exact spot and locates it. It appears to be a convenient hiding spot, perfectly suited for his plans. However, he first needs to verify which types of monsters inhabit the area, scanning the surroundings. Seong-ho identifies the tiny footprints of kobolds. This discovery is cause for celebration, as these creatures pose very little threat. Since he arrived with a preformulated strategy against low-level monsters, he has no reason to worry. Kobolds are nocturnal creatures, meaning they are currently asleep. Consequently, his plan is to suffocate them while they remain inside the cave. First, he gathers firewood by cutting branches and piles the collection at the entrance. Next, he prepares to douse the wood with gasoline. Seong-ho anticipates clearing the mission without difficulty, believing all that remains is to light the fire. However, he is shocked to hear noises from within. The creatures awake from their slumber and immediately lock eyes with him, viewing him as their next meal. Seong-ho offers them a gentle greeting before swinging his axe and lunging into action. With a single simple swing, he slashes both monsters across their necks, killing them instantly. Their drowsiness contributes to their quick defeat. Thanks to these consecutive kills, the system rewards him with a level increase, and for points next. Seong-ho tosses the lighter onto the firewood. Shortly after, smoke fumes begin to drift into the cave. In the Asura game, low-level monsters possessed a glaring weakness, a vulnerability to unfamiliar phenomena, such as this smoke. He waits outside wearing a gas mask. Although he could have attempted to burn them directly, this method is more effective. Regarding the subsequent cleanup process, the slumbering kobolds wake up in a panic and rush outside to save themselves. Seong-ho intentionally chose this strategy to weaken their bodies and create confusion during their escape. His objective is to ambush them the moment they step outside, taking advantage of their weakened state to kill them all at once. Although he anticipated at least 5 enemies to emerge, Seung-ho is surprised to see only 4. This deviates from their standard pack size, which typically consists of 7 members. Targeting one of the kobolds, he instantly kills it, noting that only 3 now remain. The survivors rush toward him, attempting to launch a counterattack. With their limited capabilities, however, he is fully prepared with his axe. Swinging the weapon with the force of a battering ram, he strikes them down. When another kobold attempts to attack, Seung-ho blinds it at point-blank range, using a potent defensive spray. Before the creature can recover or react, he assists in severing its head. With only one opponent left, the protagonist stares down the leader, who trembles in fear. Establishing himself as the predator, he declares their end, promising to make good use of the hideout they are leaving behind. The slaughter finally concludes, leaving Seung-ho collapsed on the ground in fatigue. Despite the ease of the battle, his lack of stamina proves to be a significant drawback. He observes that the system statistics are identical to those in the game, including the debuff section. Regarding his exhausted state, the mechanic, where status points do not automatically increase upon leveling up, also remains consistent. Nevertheless, the level up is beneficial, as it will eventually unlock access to the shop. Currently, his greatest advantage is possessing a private space. However, despite his desire for a clean environment, he is disappointed by the filth left behind by the kobolds. With the hideout secured, the cleaning operations commence. He is forced to clear out such a significant amount of waste that the task quickly becomes exhausting. The cleanup process feels particularly burdensome, especially immediately following a physical fight. Seung-ho curses the creatures for their unhygienic living conditions. Despite the mess, he is relieved to no longer worrying about housing. Now that he has a new home base, he utilizes the portal to return to his original world whenever he needs to dispose of the trash. While this method is a benefit, the cleaning process still consumes a vast amount of time. He is most surprised to discover how seamlessly items function between dimensions. He utilizes a pipe from one side and activates it on the other, astonishing himself with its effectiveness. After hours of effort, the cave finally glitters with cleanliness. His next tasks involve removing bloodstains and pouring concrete to facilitate storage. He considers the complexities of using mortar and sandwich panels for the construction. One positive aspect of the cave is its abundance of luminous and ignition stones. Although these are considered beginner-tier items in the game, the sheer quantity available is a significant advantage. Seung-ho decides he has a valid reason to properly mine the location. Once construction is complete the following day, he feels physically drained. He has been working so hard daily that his body aches all over. Inspecting his arm, he is surprised to see the cuts he has endured. The items he collected from the other realm are resting on a nearby table, leading him to consider making an ointment. The method is straightforward. He mixes guaca powder and vegetable oil in equal ratios and stirs them together. The result is a low-level ointment suitable for basic healing. Thanks to his background as a chef, he finds the crafting process easy. Applying the ointment to his arm feels like a tangible step forward. However, Seung-ho is troubled by the realization that he may need to repeat this production process frequently in the future. He considers the idea of raising his stats by focusing on fundamental training, but he worries that the intense risk involved might kill him before the apocalypse even arrives. Although he acknowledges the dark humor in such a possibility, Seung-ho refuses to take that chance and instead considers utilizing a more convenient weapon, such as a gun. Suddenly, a realization strikes him. There is definitely something he could use. He recalls the game's background lore, which exists separately from the main storyline. The critical question remains whether this lore will apply to the impending real-world apocalypse. Organizing his thoughts, he hopes for these backstory events to manifest, as they would benefit him in unimaginable ways. With the new plan established, he heads to the rooftop to retrieve the construction materials he ordered. Opening the portal gate, he begins tossing the bags through to the other dimension, one by one. After completing this, he gathers additional items and descends to the first floor. He is about to move a pile of packages when the same girl appears again. Seung-ho begins to wonder if she is becoming too comfortable with him. He addresses her directly, causing her some embarrassment. He assures her that he is simply busy with remodeling work, an explanation she accepts as the truth. However, she notes with surprise that he has missed his regular haircut, which he usually gets every 3 months. Seung-ho acknowledges this and realizes that a haircut would be practical for his upcoming explorations. Consequently, he stops his work and goes to her shop. At this moment, he looks unkempt with long hair. He instructs her to shave it all off, opting for a buzz cut. Surprised, she agrees to carry out his request. As she works, she is intrigued by how much broader Sung-ho's shoulders have become. He explains that he has been working out, while Mik-young discusses how the status windows are connected to survival life. She explains that awakeners are individuals who have played the game at least once throughout the conversation. Seong-ho feigns ignorance and nods in agreement. He curiously asks about her source of information. Suddenly a tattooed man enters the shop, announcing that he is there for new intelligence. Ironically, this man happens to be someone Seong-ho fought in the past. Though their conflict was merely a singing competition, Seong-ho is annoyed to discover that this individual is her source of information. The blonde-haired man complains to her that a specific person deleted their streams and is hoarding information for themselves. The situation becomes awkward when he announces his intention to uncover that player's real-world location. Seong-ho pretends to be curious about who this mysterious person might be. In-han explicitly drops the name Kimbap Joa, which was Seong-ho's username. This significantly complicates matters, as Seong-ho now realizes that people are genuinely hunting him down. In-han pressures the young woman to be bold and join their team. Seong-ho finds the entire situation ridiculous, reflecting that the only reason he deleted the videos was simply because he was disappointed with the game. Seong-ho never had time to consider personal benefits. In contrast, the intruder is an arrogant pretender who boasts loudly. He even curses at Seong-ho for abandoning the community without publicly sharing his stream data, completely unaware that the very person he is hunting is sitting directly across from him. Seong-ho questions if this hostile reaction reflects the sentiment of the entire community. This leads him to wonder if he should alter his course and start sharing information. Seong-ho stands up to personally confront the man, In-han scolding him for ruining his haircut. Midway through the session, In-han attempts to act tough, but Seong-ho glares at the shorter man with murderous intensity, ordering him to leave immediately unless he wishes to face further humiliation. Intimidated, the nuisance exits the shop as the stylist bids him farewell. Visibly relieved noticing her distress, Seong-ho asks for her phone number, solely because he perceives the man as a genuine fool who might pose a risk to her safety. Back at home, Seong-ho looks sharp with his new haircut. He focuses on searching for his username on the forums. The results are alarming. The boards are inundated with profanity and insults directed at him. While scrolling through the endless hate, he eventually locates In-han's username. The man used a pseudonym, despite the site's verification options. His entire profile is filled with negative commentary regarding Seong-ho, embodying the spirit of a dedicated internet troll. Seong-ho shuts down his computer, deciding it is the only appropriate response. He is not mentally shaken, merely disappointed. However, a strange sense of calm washes over him as he commands the portal to open. He spends the next 2 days refining his hideout, focusing on mining and construction. He utilizes a pickaxe and spreads mortar mixed with water, smoothing it evenly each day. Once the work is complete, he steps outside to wait for the mortar to cure. Gazing up at the lonely moon, suddenly he realizes he must respond to the injustice and cruelty he has witnessed. He is not a hero seeking a grand purpose. His ultimate goal is simply to survive and emerge victorious. Having made his resolution, he turns around and is immediately startled. A bone creeper is clanking toward him. Since Seong-ho is already agitated, he views the creature as a perfect target. To vent his frustration, a loud explosion follows, engulfing everything in flames. When Seong-ho wakes up, he is covered in scratches, initially unsure of what just occurred. Then, the image of the bone creeper returns to his memory. He is baffled by how he managed to survive an explosion at such close range. However, the answer becomes clear. The moment he spotted the bone creeper, he anticipated it was about to detonate, and immediately sprinted for safety. However, the detonation still catches up to him, the force of the blast knocking him unconscious, though failing to kill him nevertheless. His evasion attempt comes at a cost. Seong-ho's right side is riddled with puncture wounds. Gathering what little strength remains, he summons the status window for assistance. The system indicates that his stats have decreased due to his current physical condition. However, because the creature was destroyed in the blast, he is awarded points for its defeat. A ringing headache begins to overwhelm Seong-ho's senses. Using his final ounce of energy, he commands the portal to open. Upon arriving in the next scene, his immediate priority is treating his wounds. This process involves extracting the bone fragments embedded in his flesh, an excruciatingly painful task. Fortunately, the ointment proves effective, helping to staunch the bleeding. After applying further bandages, and checking his condition. Soon Ho succumbs to unconsciousness, having reached his physical limit for the day. Dawn breaks the following morning, and he wakes up, feeling as though he is on the verge of death. Anxious about his recovery, he immediately opens the status window to check his health. The system indicates that he is in stable condition, which brings him relief rising. He ponders how the bone creeper managed to locate him in the first place. He acknowledges that the forest is vast, making it not unlikely for creatures to suddenly emerge from hiding. This realization alarms him, motivating him to focus on honing his perception stat to boost his detection abilities. In the game, the primary way to increase such stats is by using stat points acquired through hunting or exploration experience. Another method is to utilize equipment or weapons that provide statistical buffs to the user. The problem, however, is that Sora is an incredibly difficult game. Even obtaining simple stat-boosting items requires facing dangerous monsters, significantly higher than one's own level, meaning he would have to battle hellish beasts just to secure a weapon. Additionally, skills can be unlocked after defeating monsters. High-level monsters specifically drop them, based on certain conditions, though not every skill is suitable for every player. Consequently, Soon Ho contemplates a reliable method to acquire these stat-boosting items. He decides to review footage of the game's background lore. These background stories take place chronologically, before the asteroid strikes Earth. This implies that visiting specific locations might yield special items before the actual apocalypse begins. While this is currently just a theory, Soon Ho knows he must eventually fight stronger monsters regardless. He spends the next few hours researching past data and identifies 3 critical locations where these background stories occurred. He identifies 3 potential events from the lore: the Russian ship, the Hobgoblin, and one other scenario specifically. The Jerry Mountain Auk incident is the most immediate of the group. According to the game footage, the Auk was discovered on the 26th, so Seung Ho determines he must depart on the 25th to locate it early. With his next mission established, Seung Ho grabs his phone and notices that Mik-young is calling him. At a late hour, the scene shifts to a cafe, where the Tumichi inquires about his condition, asking why he has chosen to wear a long-sleeve shirt. Despite the summer heat, Shunho realizes he must conceal his wounds, and notes that she is far more observant than she initially appears. She assumes he is bothered by the earlier incident at the shop, but Soon Ho denies this. Relieved, she expresses how frightened she had felt during that encounter. Soon Ho reminds her of an incident from the previous winter, where the same man caused trouble using an illegally modified tow truck and subsequently fought weaker individuals. He concludes that the man is simply a terrible human being. Mik-young is stunned by this news, as she had no prior intelligence on the man, but Soon Ho urges her to stay away from him. He then directly asks her why she invited him out. The young woman leans in close and reveals the secret, that she is actually an awakener. Seung Ho is baffled as to why she would share such sensitive information with him, playing along naturally. He feigns jealousy that he did not share her luck. She expresses guilt for having lied to him previously, but he assures her that it is fine. Concluding their meeting, he rises to leave. Soon Ho is pleased that she entrusted him with that information, and admits that her words made him feel better. Before departing, he leaves a subtle clue by stating his interest in survival life, declaring his full intention to study the game. Upon returning home, Soon Ho admits that he feels genuinely happy to find people of good character. Like her, he browses the stores and ends up purchasing high-quality drones and a rental car for navigation. He then heads straight to bed to recover for the following day. The next day arrives as soon as dawn breaks. He begins crafting materials to hunt the orc. At his home base, he crushes and refines ignition stones. These require precise handling, as an incorrect strike could cause them to flare up. Next, he focuses on the luminous stones. Although mining them is blinding due to their intense light, he persists because they are valuable. After grinding both types of stones, he creates a powder from them, completing the setup for his mission. Next, he mixes sugar, gasoline, and organic solvents. The final ingredient is a hardening agent to solidify the ignition stone mixture. Thanks to the flexible coordinates of his dimensional gate, he is able to set up a workspace without difficulty. Before departing, he packs all his luggage into the rental car. Satisfied with his purchases, with his supplies secured, Soon Ho drives toward Jerry Mountain with the objective of hunting orcs. He arrives at the parking lot of the Yongsan campground just before midnight, using the remaining time to engage in image training and ensure his equipment is secure. When the clock strikes 12 a.m., he initiates a full-scale search. 2 hours later, the rain intensifies, creating a mist that severely hampers visibility. Having already scouted the campground without success, he begins to wonder exactly where the orcs emerge from. The Earth he speculates that the precursor phenomenon from the game might not manifest in reality, but his thoughts are abruptly cut off by a deafening roar. Panicking, he looks behind him toward the source of the sound, and sees a dark shadowy figure approaching. Seung-ho realizes this is an orc, but not a standard one. It is a red orc subspecies, which guarantees a skill drop upon defeat. He attempts to compose himself, while igniting a firecracker. He reasons that, if everything proceeds according to his plan, he can definitely take the creature down. His strategy for dealing with the orc is straightforward. The first step involves exploiting the ORC's aggression. To draw its aggro, he waits for the moment the orc becomes distracted by the firecracker's flare, and attacks it with its axe. This is the window of opportunity. Aiming at the creature, he instantly opens the portal, retrieves a flashbang and detonates it. The intense burst of light blinds the orc, and it will take approximately 20 seconds for its vision to return, creating a critical race against time. Seung-ho then attacks the ORC's muscles, which are vulnerable due to the status effect, aiming to drastically reduce its mobility. The ORC screams in rage and swings its axe at the hero, attempting to crush him. However, Seung-ho swiftly ducks just as the axe is about to strike, successfully dodging the attack. He then takes his knife and stabs the orc's foot. The moment the blade pierces the foot, the creature yells in pain and drops to its knees. Now that the orc's eye level is aligned with his own, he shoves the prepared flame canister into its mouth. As soon as the can enters the creature's mouth, it explodes. Seung-ho immediately begins to celebrate his victory, but suddenly, the orc lands a punch that sends him flying backward. He scrambles to his feet, acknowledging that he should not have lowered his guard. So soon he watches as the orc advances, its upper body engulfed in flames. Though it appears unlikely to survive much longer, Seung is convinced he is about to be minced by the ORC and meet his end just then. The system notifies him that his level has risen to level 3, awarding him 10 additional points in a new skill called Will to Survive. He stands up, muttering that he is unable to handle this level of intensity, and wonders where the drop item is. Suddenly a light shines on his wrist. He examines it, and discovers the drop item is a perception watch. He sighs in relief, grateful that he does not have to search for the item. In the heavy rain, he approaches the dead orc, his mind racing regarding what to do with the corpse. He recalls that the Jerry Mountain orc incident was under a strict embargo in the original timeline. He then questions whether releasing this information is the right thing to do, realizing that the situation could deteriorate if handled poorly. Reflecting on what Mikyung had told him earlier, Seung-ho considers the definition of awakeners as those who have played the game at least once. This realization leads to a significant conclusion. There must be thousands of awakened individuals in existence. Even if only a small minority resemble men like Oh In-hun, they possess the potential to dismantle the legal system for personal gain, causing widespread chaos. Currently, his most pressing issue is the dead orc. He knows he cannot leave the corpse unattended, otherwise it will mutate into a bone creeper and begin harming people by the following day. A disturbing thought suddenly strikes him. He had not considered the possibility of becoming a zombie himself. Even as an awakener, he remains vulnerable to infection by spores, which could potentially turn him into one of the undead. Paralyzed by indecision, he struggles to determine the right course of action. He opens the portal, while contemplating the few likely survivors. Deciding that the creature deserves a proper disposal, Seung-ho begins digging a pit to bury the orc he just killed. However, fatigue sets in quickly, and he questions how he will manage to drag the heavy carcass into the grave. Fortunately, his newly acquired skill Will to Survive activates. Triggered by his exhaustion, the skill compels him to complete the task immediately. Driven by this power, he works with maximum speed. Having no alternative but to finish the job, he tosses the ORC into the grave, feeling grateful for the skill's assistance. Subsequently, he opens the portal and transports himself back into his moving car. The physical toll requires some recovery time before he can resume his normal activities. The next day, he wakes up, questioning the reality of the weather outside. Reviewing his plans, he notes that he should have already established a defensive line. He checks his phone, wondering if all traces of the red orc have truly vanished, deciding that it is not the right time to start new tasks today. He chooses instead to inspect the items delivered early that morning. Inside the box, he finds the necessary weapons, though he notes he can only utilize one item as a makeshift Indian war club. However, he notices that several items from the shipment are missing. He reads an included note, explaining that certain items he ordered were deemed illegal, and consequently failed to pass through customs. While occupied with inspecting the weapons, he hears another delivery van. He calls out loudly, instructing the driver to leave the package. At the front door, a knock follows, confusing him as to why the delivery person ignored his instruction. He attempts to repeat the command before opening the gate. To his surprise, it is not a delivery person, but Mi-kyung. She stands there, explaining that since they haven't met in a while, she wanted to discuss something with him. Holding a bag of food, she asks if he would like to share some rabaki with her. With only 24 days remaining until the apocalypse, Songo finds it hard to believe that Mi-kyung is actually visiting his home. He becomes visibly nervous and cannot stop blushing. Once she serves the meal, she urges him to eat before it gets cold, and he complies with her suggestion. Once they finish eating, he asks her what she wanted to discuss. She gets straight to the point, recalling his earlier mention of investigating Asura, and offers to discuss some important information regarding the game. This topic is not what the protagonist had expected. He had briefly entertained the thought that she might have come with romantic intentions. However, he reassures himself that discussing the impending apocalypse is the best option at the moment, recognizing the necessity of having reliable company during difficult times. She quickly begins to take out the trash. While he prepares by setting up his computer, he decides to reveal to her that he has awakened, reasoning that it would be better for her to hear it from him, rather than finding out through other means. He begins by explaining the Iron Death Plague in detail, noting that roaming with a group larger than 6 makes them an easy target for zombies. He emphasizes that the perception stat is crucial for survival, making it the most important skill, as the ultimate goal of the game is simply to stay alive. Just as he is about to explain further, she interrupts him. She brings up the comments made by Owen Hawk regarding the backlash directed at the player, Kimba Plover, questioning why he is not sharing information. Jongho does not have a ready answer, and asks her to guess the reason. She speculates that everyone has a motive, and that specific circumstances likely justify the silence. He then informs her that he rejected the man's offer to join his group, prompting her to wonder why he would make that decision. To explain, he takes out his phone and plays a recording of the group discussing a plan to kidnap a girl, simply because she was playing hard to get. Hearing the conversation again angered him. He turns to Mi-kyung, warning her that when the apocalypse arrives, people's true colors will inevitably be revealed. He advises her not to trust anyone, but she startles him by suggesting that they should form a party together. He clenches his fist, unable to give an immediate answer. A conflict exists, because one of his goals is to reach level 10 and unlock the shop before the tutorial begins. In survival life, the rank of respawning monsters scales according to the player's level. Consequently, if she were to accompany him, she would likely suffer a horrific death. He laughs nervously, asking what she would do if he were to turn into a zombie. She assures him she would be fine, and uses her trait to teleport onto his dining table. She demonstrates her ability Blink, boasting that she would only need to dodge if he ever attempted to bite her. He is surprised by her skill, but warns her not to reveal it to just anyone. She replies that she trusts him, and brightly suggests that they would make a great team, provided they do not turn into zombies. Sometime later, he stands near the trees, reflecting on how easy it was to construct fences. The process involved hammering support posts into the ground to set them up, followed by wrapping and securing barbed wire around them. Following that, he installs infrared sensors in several locations, completing the task, surveying his handiwork. He praises himself, convinced that this effort surely warrants at least a single point in dexterity. Sunho then begins to head back, finishing up the mortar application and establishing a defensive wall. He decides to proceed with transporting the packages. After some time, he completes the task of moving the boxes. As he assesses his next move, a sudden chill overcomes him, causing him to sneeze. He realizes that the environment in the other dimension will be cold, and that he will eventually need to take shelter there, prompting him to devise necessary countermeasures. The protagonist examines the cave entrance and determines that a simple curtain will be insufficient, resolving to construct a proper gate instead. With each step he takes, his mental checklist of obligations continues to expand. Later, he visits a woodworking shop to arrange for production and purchase various items. On his return journey, he scouts the locations he intends to loot during the 5-hour window before the Iron Death Plague spreads. While compiling his list, he is intercepted by Zhang Zhenshang, an acquaintance he has not seen in a long time. This man is a gym director, a divorcee and the father of a young daughter. Seung-ho reads the man's expression, noting that he does not look well. Seung seems indifferent to his own state, but observes Seung-ho's physique. Noting that he appears to be getting back into shape, the protagonist then asks what is bothering him. To which, Sean replies that his distress should be obvious, given that the world is ending. Seung-ho is surprised that the gym director is also aware of the situation, while Sean questions whether Seung-ho actually believes it. Initially Sean was skeptical, until he witnessed his friend levitating, demonstrating a superpower he had been granted. The protagonist lies, claiming he is not awakened, prompting the gym director to sigh sadly and admit that he is not awakened either. Currently, Seung's friend is heading to a broadcasting station to monetize his ability. The gym director gestures for Seung-ho to sit beside him, leading Seung-ho to realize that the existence of the awakened will soon be public knowledge. Seung shifts the conversation to a bizarre recent event, the widow shootout. Seung-ho cannot believe what he is hearing, as he had missed the morning news. Jong encourages him to check the news, but notes that posts are being deleted instantly, indicating that the media is now under strict control. Jong explains the follow-up reports, detailing how authorities attempted to cover up the incident by blaming the shooting on a deserter. Consequently, the area where the shootout occurred has been closed to the public, with access restricted to the army and police. Suddenly the protagonist stands up, offers an excuse to leave, and begins to run off back at home. He reflects on the fact that the shootout occurred immediately following the ORC incident. The government's obvious reaction leads him to suspect that they are already involved in the situation. He opens a file on his computer and plays a video. He is surprised to discover that many people knew the exact timing of the precursor phenomenon, even though he had eliminated the AUK. The shootout still took place at the same time. While deep in thought, he questions whether someone leaked information to the government early on, attempting to initiate action. Starting with the first precursor phenomenon, he considers the possibility that this individual has not stepped into the spotlight because they lack an offensive trait. Although the specific identity remains unclear, he is certain that someone is operating behind the government's actions. Seung-ho ponders who this mysterious figure might be. Through his research, he narrows the candidates down to 3 veteran players. After significant contemplation, he eliminates the game's creator from the list, given that the game's mechanics are being forced upon reality. The creators are likely villains. He reasons that if these villains were backed by the government, they never would have permitted him to kill the AUK. He sketches the faces of the 3 primary suspects. He speculates whether the culprit is the number 1 survivor. If this theory holds true, he realizes he does not need to share this intelligence with the government himself. Leaning back in his chair, the protagonist wonders if the number 1 survivor is the person he actually knew. Feeling a sense of longing for his veteran friends, he chooses to trust them for the time being. Furthermore, he acknowledges that sharing information would not halt the approaching catastrophe, so he decides against intervening just yet. 2 days later, the door is constructed and the pantry is prepared, marking the completion of the first shelter. He attempts to install 2 logistic trays by drilling through the wall, but he discovers there is significantly less space than he had anticipated. He has been gradually working on waterproofing the basement, which is now finished. He steps away, resolving to figure out the remaining issues. Once the curing process reaches phase 2, he faces a crucial task: mapping the area using his drone. Donning his VR headset, he launches the drone into the air, viewing the shelter from a midpoint perspective. Before expanding his exploration, through the drone's feed, he identifies snow fields to the northwest and an ocean to the south. Noting that the ocean appears free of monsters and abundant in prey, he decides to deploy traps to catch fish. He examines the valley to analyze the ecosystem surrounding his shelter. Suddenly, he notices the location where he had buried the owlbear, but the corpse is gone. He wonders if a large predator consumed it. However, he refrains from forming an immediate conclusion, because the area is covered in numerous tracks, predominantly those of orcs, which makes the situation even more suspicious. He calculates the distance between the valley and the shelter to be approximately 1.5 kilometers, realizing that his base is in a more dangerous position than he initially assumed. Aware that goblins are in the vicinity, and unwilling to risk losing the drone, he recalls the device to the shelter. He manages to sketch a detailed map and identifies the types of animals inhabiting the forest. His next objective is to physically inspect these areas. Himself, he intends to start by visiting the nearest swamp to determine if farming is viable. Suddenly the infrared alarm triggers. He steps outside knowing goblins are present, as evidenced by their footprints on the ground. Since the protagonist was already anticipating this, the situation presents a perfect opportunity. He wonders if his heightened awareness is a result of his recently increased perception stat, noting that even the faintest sounds have become incredibly clear to him. After some time he manages to spot a group of goblins, while remaining undetected. This position provides him with the perfect angle for an ambush. He draws his spear and arrow, launching an attack directly at a goblin's head. The target falls dead, but the remaining goblins instantly spot him and charge forward to retaliate. However, he eliminates them swiftly, making the kills appear effortless. Having killed 4 of them, he turns his attention to the remaining 4. Although he becomes surrounded, he retrieves an item from his pocket that instantly causes the goblins to collapse to their knees. Taking advantage of their incapacitated state, the protagonist uses his knife to decapitate them. He realizes he successfully exploited the goblins' exhaustion to win the battle, a strategy he can hardly believe actually worked. The countdown to the apocalypse now stands at 21 days. As he digs into the ground, fatigue sets in, but his trait suddenly triggers, restoring his body to peak efficiency. He acknowledges that this skill is not entirely useless. After all, shortly thereafter, he finished burying the goblin corpses. He then turns his attention to the loot he has gathered. First he collects the guaca fruit, which is highly effective for restoring strength. The loot also contains a significant amount of vegetable oil, leading him to suspect that a harvest site must be nearby. Upon inspecting the pouch of the goblin leader, he is surprised to discover a living toad inside. The creature is blue, causing him to wonder why they would carry a live specimen rather than a dead one. Suddenly, the toad begins to emit a scent, and he realizes this is the source of the paralysis poison used by the goblins. He instantly decides that he must raise this toad, regardless of the difficulties. Beyond finding the creature incredibly cute, he sees practical value in extracting its poison. By injecting small doses, he plans to build up a resistance to the toxin. Furthermore, utilizing the paralysis poison will significantly simplify future hunting efforts. He decides to name the toad Jodik and intends to feed it well. The system then sends a notification, confirming that the toad is now recognized as his property. He wonders if this mechanic acts as a hidden gimmick, implemented into reality. I thought that leads him to overthink and overanalyze the situation. Following this, he resumes exploration by opening the dimensional gate. Using the gate to travel back and forth, he finally completes the reorganization of his supplies. Immediately afterward, he begins searching the immediate surroundings and discovers a spring that his drone had previously missed. Examining the water, he confirms it is ordinary and poses no significant danger. He is surprised to find a hidden area near his shelter. Located right behind the spring, he discovers a guava tree and vegetable oil buds. He proceeds to pick the fruits and harvest a substantial amount of the oil buds to ensure he does not lose his way back to this location. He marks the trees along his path before heading back. Upon returning to his apartment, he feeds his new pet Joe DLC. For the time being, he decides to raise the pet on the 2nd floor of his apartment, reasoning that leaving Joe Doc alone in the hideout would result in the creature's death. Aside from caring for his pet, Seong-ho had numerous other tasks to complete. The most time-consuming of these was the production of the ointment, which resulted in an accidental surplus. Unsure of how to handle the excess, he determines that he cannot give it to Mi-kyung, specifically because she is also an awakener. Consequently, he decides to gift it to young Nim. At Young's location, the man is drinking a protein shake when Seung-ho hands him the ointment, prompting him to ask what the item is. Seung-ho explains that he purchased too much of it, and that it is highly effective for treating wounds. Hyung jokingly asks if Seung-ho is getting involved in multi-level marketing, a suggestion the protagonist quickly denies. Nevertheless, Hyung is grateful for both the medicine and for the information regarding Sora that Seung-ho had sent him. In return, Seung-ho thanks him for the tip. Regarding the shooting incident, Seung-ho observes that the gym is unusually quiet. Hyung explains that everyone left to formulate plans. After the individual on the broadcast disseminated his knowledge, the group has decided to establish a base at this location. Seung-ho warns him that gathering a large number of people is a sign of danger. However, Yang refuses to abandon his members, driven by his intense loyalty to them. When Yang inquires about Seung-ho's plans, the protagonist simply brushes the question aside. Suddenly they hear a scream that Yang finds familiar. Looking down from the building, he spots Mi-kyung collapsed on the ground. Both men rush to her aid, questioning what occurred. She explains that she was attacked, but was unable to see the perpetrator. Young instantly rushes outside to inspect the building and the surrounding area, disregarding Si-Young-ho's attempt to stop him from going out. At that moment, meanwhile, Si-Young-ho remains with Mi-kyung. She elaborates that everything suddenly went dark before her eyes, leaving her unable to process what was happening. Hearing this detail sends a chill down Si-Young-ho's spine, as he realizes exactly what is transpiring. Specific groups have started to make their move. He urges her to instantly use her blink ability whenever such a situation arises. He also assures her that he will send a self-defense kit soon, and implores her to be extremely cautious from now on. Only 20 days remain until the apocalypse arrives. Seung-ho recalls a famous internet meme, stating that if 5 people gather, one is bound to be useless. Trolls exist everywhere in the world, but they were particularly prevalent in Asura. In the game, specific patches existed for interference. Although developers responded to reports, they failed to effectively catch these malicious players. In Asura, trolls would join a team, pretending to be normal players, only to later lure the party into an area filled with monsters, causing the entire team to be wiped out. They would approach beginners with kindness, only to kill them later and steal their belongings. These individuals did everything possible to incite conflict between parties. Their actions caused the game, which was already not particularly famous, to collapse within a single year. Eventually, the user count dropped to just 4, largely because Seung-ho's team took it upon themselves to hunt down the remaining trolls. Seung-ho briefly wonders why he is recalling this history before summarizing his current findings. Following the Uedo shootout, the Awakener communities have merged. They are no longer simply exchanging information. They are now actively plotting schemes. He stops speaking abruptly upon discovering that individuals are selling his videos. Browsing the site further, the protagonist realizes that his former teammate, Dao Hyusum, was actually a troller. He is shocked to see a video thumbnail claiming that Do Jusong was carried by the player Kim Bapjao. Seung-ho suspects that this troller is attempting to lure victims using edited footage. Surprisingly, he sarcastically applauds Do Jusong, noting that the schemer is being praised for his clever thinking. Stretching his body, he resolves to train harder to handle such deceitful individuals. Over the next 13 days, whenever time permits, the hero studies weapon handling and real combat techniques via an online survival channel. During this period, he also observes monsters attacking, including assaults on hideouts. Furthermore, he notes that many existing strategies and weapons fail to account for the wire disease. Consequently, after this 13-day training regimen, Seung-ho finally focuses on selecting a primary weapon. He requires a weapon that remains functional if the wire disease strikes, while also being effective for both ANTI personnel combat and monster elimination. Inspecting his tool bag, he finds an Indian war club, a wooden slingshot, ochre clay beads, and a handmade stone axe. Unfortunately, none of these perfectly meet his strict requirements. Initially, the protagonist decides to test the slingshot. While it offers high utility, the ochre clay beads are problematic due to their weak stopping power. Next, he opts to use the Indian war club. He reflects that if the wire disease is considered an inevitability, this weapon removes that worrying. He notes that the most efficient method to dispatch a zombie is to destroy the spores within the skull using a blunt instrument. He recalls that his intended purchase upon reaching level 10 is an ebony wood club, a blunt weapon type, making it essential for him to increase his proficiency. Now, however, he questions the Indian war club's effectiveness against human opponents. He concludes that its utility is ambiguous, particularly against psychic awakeners, who would be difficult to counter with such a weapon. He is aware that in survival life, killing a human yields 50 points, although the murderer system, which forces registered killers into death matches with nearby players, was designed to prevent abuse. He anticipates that many will still eliminate other users for points, accepting the penalties. Meanwhile, he obliterates a practice dummy with the Indian war club. He resolves to avoid hostile players until he has completed his item and skill farming. After the rigorous session, the hero wipes away his sweat and plans to dismantle the store completely, but he pauses abruptly upon hearing the sound of a wolf nearby. He is startled, wondering if an injured animal has wandered near the hideout. Later, Seung-ho discovers the wolf, which is significantly larger than average, large enough for a person to ride. The system identifies it as a gray wolf, but upon closer inspection, he realizes it is not breathing. He wonders if it was a stray or if it sought refuge near his hideout. After being attacked seeking more information, the protagonist begins examining its injuries. Suddenly a small wolf pup strikes him on the back. Seung-ho realizes that the deceased creature is the mother of this pup, which now stands defiantly between him and the corpse. In an effort to protect her, he finds himself conflicted, unable to use force to separate the small wolf from its mother. Deciding to bury the deceased wolf immediately, the protagonist grabs a shovel. As he begins to dig, he reasons that if the wolf was a monster, the corpse would transform into a bone creeper, and if not, it would simply attract other predators. Eventually, the grave is fully dug. Meanwhile, the young wolf sleeps beside its mother, a sight that reminds Seung-ho of his own childhood, and Mangchi, the dog he raised back then. He picks up the small wolf, explaining gently that its mother will be sleeping in this spot. He assures the creature that it can visit her anytime, as he intends to construct a doggy door at the hideout to allow access. Jung-ho then offers the wolf a piece of meat, promising to ensure it never goes hungry until it reaches adulthood. In exchange, he asks for its assistance, specifically utilizing its exceptional sense of smell. When he asks for its agreement, the small wolf responds happily with a soft noise. Patting its head, the protagonist names the animal Dingo. A system window appears, notifying him that he has successfully communicated with the gray wolf, and that Dingo is now considered his property. With this event concluded, 19 days remain until the apocalypse. Seung-ho busies himself with Dingo's training, instructing the animal to repeat recently taught actions when asked for a paw. Dingo places it in his owner's hand. The wolf sits, lies down and remains quiet upon command, following every instruction perfectly. Finally, Seung-ho tosses a large bone into the air, which Dingo successfully catches with a leap. The protagonist feels satisfied, noting the creature's rapid learning speed, which he attributes to its otherworldly origins. Reflecting on its superior scent tracking abilities, he mentally regards Dingo as a stroke of luck and a blessing. He shows affection to his adorable companion with a kiss and begins to speak, but is interrupted by his ringing phone. Answering it, Seung-ho sees a message from Hyun, suggesting he search for levitation on the web. Shortly after, he discovers an article regarding a person dubbed the first superhuman. This individual claims that zombies and monsters will soon appear, bringing disaster. The article has already reached the #1 ranking. In the comments, the public expresses skepticism, believing the broadcast channel staged the event for ratings. He observes that, while many users are ignorant of the truth, the awakeners in the comments section are clearly alarmed. He finds the situation amusing, noting the irony that some people get upset when information is withheld, while others become angry when their exclusive knowledge becomes widespread. The protagonist then wonders how the government will respond. Although aware of rallies regarding these shocks and superpowers, he snaps out of his thoughts, deciding not to involve himself in such matters, although he implies that the government will eventually take action once the second Omen the Hobgoblin event occurs. Seung-ho decides not to waste a single moment. He informs Dingo that their exploration will begin that very day. Deep down, the protagonist understands that thorough preparation is the only viable solution, and Dingo appears eager for the challenge. Later, they enter the portal world, and Seung-ho reflects on his reasons for choosing to conduct interdimensional exploration. With the wolf, he allows Dingo to sniff a small pouch and commands the animal to locate it. The first objective of this exercise is to prepare for the upcoming Hobgoblin event, as he needs Dingo to properly imprint the specific scent of goblins. Shortly after, Dingo barks, having successfully discovered the bait hidden in the bushes, and the hero feels proud that the animal tracked it down using only a lingering scent. The second reason for the excursion is to test whether Dingo can remain calm during live combat and follow specific commands. He gives a signal, and the wolf immediately dashes forward. With great precision, Dingo hunts down a rabbit in the grass, prompting the protagonist to praise him. The third reason for their exploration is to confirm whether hunting is viable in the other world. Seung-ho approaches Dingo to inspect the prey, observing the dead rabbit and noting its large size and powerful claws. Afterward, the boy and his small wolf continue their exploration. Moving ahead, he speculates on how Dingo's cognition would translate into system statistics. He decides to head toward the valley to verify this for himself. A system window then appears, notifying him that Dingo's health has increased by 1 point. Recalling that his own health stat as Kimbafa was 170, the hero is impressed by how rapidly Dingo is growing. Suddenly, Dingo begins to cough, and the protagonist rushes over to offer water. He reminds his partner not to wander into the woods alone as Dingo drinks. The boy spots a large green pepper nearby and wonders if the wolf ate it. The system reveals the plant to be a bull pepper. Seung-ho is pleased to find such an item in the woods. He praises Dingo and promises him plenty of treats later. He then proceeds to dig up and harvest the bull pepper. Next they set out for their final hunt. Both sit on rocks at the edge of a stream. On this occasion, Dingo does not detect any unusual scents or presences. Deep down, the boy reflects that red trout are not monsters, and therefore do not yield points or items. However, he believes it is essential for the young Dingo to gain experience, which he views as valuable. After hunting the red trout, the protagonist decides to finalize preparations for phase 2 and return home. The following day his entire restaurant is demolished. The manager of the demolition company instructs the hero to contact them within 3 days if any repair issues arise. Seung-ho sincerely thanks the manager for completing the work so early in the morning. Taking a deep breath, he feels a tinge of sadness seeing the demolished site, but acknowledges that the destruction was necessary. Upon entering, Jong-ho theorizes that once the apocalypse hits, those who manage to avoid infection will inevitably resort to looting shops. He concedes that he would likely take similar actions, realizing he lacks the moral standing to complain. As he begins the cleanup process, Hyung appears behind him surveying the vacant space. Hyung notes that he too has reduced his inventory to only the barest essentials. When the protagonist questions why Hyung is there, Hyung flicks Seung-ho's forehead, expressing irritation that the hero had departed the previous day. Without saying a word, Hyung claims he stopped by simply to verify that Seung-ho was still alive. Throughout this interaction, Dingo observes Hyung with a cold, guarded gaze. Hyung asks if Seung-ho always owned a dog, but Seung-ho clarifies that his previous pet passed away long ago. He introduces the animal as his new companion, leading Hyung to comment on how adorable the wolf appears. Seung-ho presses for the real reason behind the visit, though Hyung insists again that he merely came to check on him. The protagonist remains skeptical, prompting Hyung to disclose a secondary motive. While admitting his concern was genuine, he reveals that he has identified the culprits responsible for the attack on Mikyung. At this juncture, only 17 days remain before the apocalypse begins. Seated together, Seung-ho learns that the group, organized by Kim Cheol-jun, a man distinguished by his habit of always wearing a hat, is specifically targeting Mickey Hyung. Hyung further mentions that the tow truck driver, whom Seung-ho dislikes, is also affiliated with that group. Pointing toward the mountains ahead, Hyung identifies the area near the base, where redevelopment had stalled, indicating that their hideout is located in that vicinity. The protagonist is curious about how Hyung uncovered this information, to which Hyung explains that the clues naturally fell into place. He elaborates that Han Jin-seon, the individual capable of levitation, recently appeared on a variety show, giving Hyung the opportunity to ask him directly. Han Jin disclosed that he had previously met Cheol-jun's group, but found the members unpleasant. Consequently, he refused to remain with them due to personality conflicts. Following the incident with Mikyung, all the female members began to exit the party. When asked about their reasons for leaving, the women merely claimed they had received offers from other groups of awakeners. Hyung seeks Seung-ho's opinion, and the hero suggests that, unlike Mikyung, the other women were likely deceived into joining. Hyung then abruptly reveals that his own party has dwindled down to just 4 members, himself included. This revelation stuns the protagonist, who recalls that the group consisted of 20 members only days prior. Although Hyung offers no further elaboration, he acknowledges that their party is now reduced to containing only 2 awakeners. Seung-ho struggles to comprehend this information, remembering the favors they had performed for the members who ultimately decided to leave. However, Hyung remains composed, explaining to the protagonist that this is simply the nature of reality. Those individuals were merely prioritizing their own self-preservation. Furthermore, Hyung expresses concern regarding his daughter, little Ji-yoon, and debates whether he should contact his ex-wife. The protagonist maintains a neutral expression, recognizing the difference in their situations. Yet he wishes to verify if his own reasoning is sound. He decides to ask Hyung a question that has been weighing on his mind. The protagonist inquires how Hyung would react if the apocalypse truly arrived, and people began to threaten him. Before he can complete the hypothetical scenario, Hyung cuts him off, insisting firmly that he would not hesitate to kill them. Hyung explains that, while he holds a principle against harming others, A lawless disaster would leave him with no alternative. He believes that in such dire times, there is no room for evil to persist. Hyung then curiously asks why Seung-ho would raise such a topic. Noting that the question seems uncharacteristic of him, the protagonist avoids giving a genuine answer. Just as a cry for help rings out, the sound emanates from the hero's cell phone. Hyung wonders if it is the voice of a lost child, but Seung-ho immediately checks the map and requests that Hyung look after Dingo for a short time. Elsewhere, Mickey Young finds herself surrounded by hostile individuals, having apparently transmitted a distress signal. The tow truck enforcer mockingly asks Mickey Young why she is causing such a scene and demands that she come down. In response, Mickey Young stands on the edge of the rooftop, shouting that she had already refused their offers. Yet they continue to chase her. She demands to know their motives. The enforcer urges her to reconsider, but Kim Chaeol and Ma Jang-in step forward, insisting on handling the situation their way. They point out that, since they are located in a desolate redevelopment area, no one will come to rescue her. Kim Chaeol advises her not to waste her energy, reminding her that they all possess special traits. Before initiating a countdown, meanwhile the protagonist is hiding in a nearby alley, preparing his weapons at the count of 2. He aims his slingshot at Kim Chaeol, and by the count of 3, the target is struck. The entire group is thrown into confusion, scrambling to identify the source of the attack. Suddenly the protagonist emerges wearing a helmet, and steps forward to attack On-in. Internally, debating whether he should reveal his identity, wielding the Indian war club, Seung-ho strikes On-in with significant force, before immediately targeting another gang member. This second individual emits a dark energy, leading the hero to suspect the presence of a vision obscuring trait. Yet Seung-ho manages to land a hit regardless. Breathing heavily, the hero hears Mi Kyung shouting a warning. He pivots to find Kim Chaeol rushing at him with a bat. The blow connects, cracking his helmet. Seung-ho is startled by the sheer destructive power of the strike. Simultaneously, Kim Chaeol identifies his attacker, but Seung-ho is distracted by his analysis, recognizing that Kim Chaeol possesses an incredibly potent offensive trait even at this early stage. Kim Chaeol vows to cripple the protagonist as his subordinates rally behind him, resolved to use their full strength, even though they are not awakeners. On-in charges the hero, channeling electricity and mocking him. During the approach, Seung-ho hesitates, uncertain how to respond to such a display of skill, and briefly considers utilizing the dimensional gate. However, just as On-in prepares to land a blow, Dingo bursts onto the scene and bites down on On-in's arm. Hyung steps out from a nearby alley, questioning the appropriateness of such violence. In broad daylight, he suggests the gang should depart to avoid legal trouble, mentioning that he is contacting the police. The group decides to retreat for the time being. Hyung remarks that despite their arrogant behavior, they appear weak. Myung descends from the roof and immediately grabs the hero's head to check for injuries, pointing out the damage to his helmet. Hyung offers to carry the boy on his back, witnessing their concern. Seung-ho's thoughts flash to his former comrades from the game when Mi Kyung suggests a hospital visit. The protagonist turns away, insisting he is unhurt. He then asks Hyung about recruiting Mi Kyung into their party. Hyung replies that there is no issue, provided she consents, and she happily accepts the invitation. The hero departs, claiming he has tasks to attend to, leaving Hyung and Mi Kyung confused by his strange behavior. Upon returning home, he focuses on regulating his emotions and planning the second phase of his preparations. He feels his sudden exit was unavoidable. Seeing Hyung and Mi Kyung together tempted him to entrust them with the secret of his abilities. However, the decision had already been made. To maximize the utility of the dimensional gate, he determines he must level up rapidly, prioritizing skill acquisition and resource farming. The concept of overwhelming enemies with superior item power resonates with him even more. After the confrontation with the mountain gang, he realizes that sticking to his original preparation plan will result in a level gap of 3 or more, causing the monsters spawning near him to be stronger, which would complicate teaming up with his 2 companions. He continues working until he successfully installs a wood-burning stove in his hideout, aware that it will ensure a good night's sleep. Dingo also appreciates the warmth, sleeping soundly beside it. Now the protagonist waits for a few final installations to arrive, which will bring his initial hideout setup to near completion. Driven by determination, he resolves to stay awake through the night to work. The countdown now stands at 16 days remaining before the apocalypse begins. A news broadcast provides an update Regarding the previously observed asteroid, the report states that the HSA has announced that the asteroid Yunjambi has reached the midpoint of the solar system. While the HSA is monitoring its trajectory closely, Jupiter's gravity has caused the meteorite to fracture. Thomas Chandler, the head of the Meteorite Observation Department, assures the public that the resulting fragments, named Yunjambi Alpha and Beta, pose no threat of approaching Earth. However, Seung-ho recalls the actual timeline on D5. Merely 5 days prior to the apocalypse, Yunjambi Beta was the first to impact. It struck the ocean near a Russian vessel, generating a tsunami that washed the ship ashore at Gamcheon port, an event that introduced zombies to Korea. The broadcast shifts focus to the shooting incident at Wado. It is reported that President Jang Won-taek has remained secluded in his residence for a week, leading opposition leaders to release a joint statement, agreeing to convene a hearing. Speculation is rising among the public that these political maneuvers are linked to rumors regarding awakeners and the approaching catastrophe. Hearing this, the protagonist inwardly acknowledges that the end of the world is genuinely at hand. He considers the media's newfound interest in these topics to be a positive development, concluding that the increased scrutiny will make it harder for awakeners to engage in criminal activity. He then opens his laptop to gauge the community's reaction. Scrolling through the comments, he observes that users are expressing strong views on the situation. Coincidentally, he notices a comment posted by My Dream, prompting him to wonder if this individual has remained active this whole time. My Dream was a player reputed for his kindness toward beginners, and Seung-ho's group had played with him on several occasions. This player's ambition was to construct a bunker. Had the hero not possessed a private portal, he might have been tempted to join that cause. He decides against entering any agreements, unless his veteran friends also choose to join. My Dream, though he bookmarks the comment for future reference. Closing his laptop, he turns his attention to the construction of his second shelter. The following day, Seung-ho stands before his hideout, realizing that he is capable of pulling 2 consecutive all-nighters although physically exhausted. The sight of the completed exterior revitalizes him. It is now time to resolve the issue of utilizing the electricity generated by the solar panels. Essentially, this involves several wiring procedures to ensure the current is compatible with his electronic devices. Fortunately, when he plugs his phone in to charge, it functions correctly. He raises his arms in triumph, declaring that he has successfully established the foundation for survival in this new world for the first time in a long while. He experiences a surge of dopamine. The previous day, he also gathered luminous and ignition stones. Upon digging further, he discovered a mineral known as emeris, which is harder and sharper than obsidian. Although it is currently useless to him, he considers it a better find than coming up empty-handed. He decides to postpone the installation of the LED lights as he needs to organize the food supplies in the basement before going to sleep. Suddenly, a loud noise from Dingo demands his attention. Rushing outside, Seung-ho finds Dingo in a standoff against Maine wolves, a species of monster he recognizes from Sora. He questions why these creatures are present, as they typically inhabit high-altitude regions. Observing Dingo's visible rage, the hero suspects that these are the specific wolves responsible for killing Dingo's mother. He attempts to soothe Dingo, though he internally acknowledges that he cannot defeat the entire pack at this moment. If he moves to retrieve a better weapon, he risks exposing his back to an attack, which could prove fatal. Consequently, the protagonist resolves to focus on forcing the Alpha Wolf to retreat, reasoning that the rest of the pack will likely follow. He observes the Wolf's extremely cautious behavior, noting that the subordinates only move once. The Alpha acts first. He considers their ability to coordinate an attack, and recalls that these wolves possess an extreme sensitivity to scents. Fortunately, Seung-ho is carrying pepper spray. He deduces that if he can spray the Alpha, he will be able to drive it away from the shelter. Sweat runs down his face as he weighs the risk of being attacked. Before he can execute his plan, he contemplates a method to distract the creature, to land a hit with the spray. Suddenly, an idea strikes him, which he believes is logically feasible. Determined to defend the hideout he built with his own hands, he steels himself. He instantly throws a knife at the Alpha, but the creature dodges. The Alpha then leaps at the hero, but as it closes the distance, Sang-ho opens the portal, seizing the opportunity. He sprays the animal as the Alpha loses its composure. The protagonist drives his knife into its eye. With that strike, the Wolf pack retreats. The hero sits down, having narrowly escaped death. Dingo approaches to check on him, and Seung-ho pats the wolf's head in appreciation. He promises Dingo that he will avenge its mother in the future. With this confrontation over, only 15 days remain until the apocalypse arrives. Having finished organizing the basement, Seung-ho heads to the hardware store and pharmacy, with the goal of finalizing his minimal defense supplies by this point. He has gone 68 hours without sleep, and the recent confrontation with the wolves has further exhausted him. Nevertheless, he reflects that he might have been fortunate during that encounter. Had those creatures been werewolves instead, he likely would have been completely decimated. He considers the possibility that he had become careless, focusing solely on immediate threats, without accounting for random variables that could appear. Feeling backed into a corner, Songo entertains the idea of expanding his territory to construct a proper shelter. His previous drone surveys also suggest this is the correct course of action. Hyunjin greets him from a distance, while Seung-ho remains deep in thought, calculating that his new plans could secure additional space for farming and supply storage. He determines that once the second line of defense is established, he will focus on acquiring Bluetooth beacons to extend his signal range. His friend repeatedly calls his name, finally snapping Seung-ho back to reality by asking what he is doing there. Keeping his answer brief, Seung-ho replies that he has come to purchase various supplies. Hyunjin assumes Seung-ho is there to buy weapons, a strange conclusion, given that they are standing in front of a hardware store. Hyunjin clarifies that he is not the one interested in weapons. Rather, the attractive woman accompanying him is the interested party. She is introduced as a member of their team. After completing his purchases, Seung-ho learns that his friend had run into the woman and is currently attempting to dissuade her from buying weapons at the store. However, she remains stubborn regarding her decision. Seung-ho decides it would be helpful to hand her the short summary note he had prepared. However, even after reading it, she remains entirely skeptical. She stares at him with an icy glare that unsettles him, to the point where he verbally confronts her about it. Suddenly the woman speaks up, recalling that he is actually the owner of the Tteokbokki restaurant. Seung-ho confirms her suspicion. She appears visibly stunned by his current appearance and the shift in his personality. Assuming she finds him rude, Seung-ho apologizes, but she responds by reaching into her wallet and handing him a business card. The young woman is identified as Yo Soo-yeon, and she reveals that she is a doctor, possessing both intelligence and beauty. Immediately after learning her profession, Seung-ho explains the basics of the game to her, just as he had done for Hyunjin and Mikyung. However, the doctor concludes that she does not particularly care, expressing her belief that the game lacks a scientific explanation. Seung-ho agrees that it is simply a mindless game, but Soo-yeon is not yet finished with her assessment. One specific detail bothers her, and she immediately points out that he must be an awakener himself. Seung feels slightly discouraged by her accurate assumption. Noting that Soo-yeon is exceptionally intelligent, she deduces that his explanations of the game are so vivid that it is impossible he has not played it. However, Soo-yeon does not pursue the thought any further, and simply thanks him for the summary. Meanwhile, Hyunjun feels jealous that he could not explain things as effectively. The doctor humorously remarks that Hyunjun cannot even compare to the depth of knowledge Seung-ho possesses regarding the game. Grateful for the assistance, Soo-yeon befriends Seung-ho, recognizing him as a good person. Consequently, another attractive woman is effectively added to his circle. The very next day, the protagonist is back in his room, cleaning the blade of his spear. The new weapon appears formidable, and he is curious to test its capabilities in combat. With his initial setup now complete, he calls for his dog Dingo, and explains that they are going to avenge the wolf's mother. While it is not strictly an act of revenge, it would pose a significant problem if an intruder were to discover the hideout. Therefore, they must act swiftly to eliminate those dangerous threats. In the following scene, the pair prepares for the kill. For this mission, Dingo has a crucial role to fulfill. Currently, they are staring down a pack of wolves, but strangely only four are visible. The most intriguing detail is the absence of an alpha wolf among the group. Upon closer inspection, Seung-ho realizes the true situation. An owlbear is ferociously tearing apart the flesh of a wolf, having already slaughtered several of them. Seung-ho considers the creature's presence convenient, as it has effectively cleaned up a significant number of the enemies. A specific characteristic of main wolf packs is that the moment they lose their alpha, the pack crumbles without a leader. Their senses become scattered, and they fall into confusion, resulting in a total lack of coordination. Seung-ho identifies this as the perfect opportunity to eliminate them one by one, as if on cue one wolf rushes toward him. but Seong-ho casually deploys a web trap, capturing it with ease. The once ferocious Wolf is reduced to a whimpering creature, wailing in fear of death. However, these displays do not sway the protagonist, who instantly kills it with his spear. Although the sight is pitiable, the mission must be secured. With one Wolf eliminated, 3 points are acquired. The remaining 3 wolves are drawn to Jung-ho's presence. As he runs off, all 3 become hyper-aggressive and initiate a chase. 2 wolves scatter to the sides, while 1 lunges from above to secure the kill. However, Seong-ho counters using a spray. He incapacitates 1, but he remains under attack by the other 2, approaching from opposite directions. First, he targets the one on his right, plunging the spear deep into the Wolf's belly. The remaining Wolf attempts to use this opening to attack from behind, but Dingo comes to the rescue with a powerful tackle. With another Wolf killed, he secures 3 additional points. Seong-ho menacingly declares his intent to stab each of them until they are dead, proving that he is not the one in danger, but rather the danger itself. With the Wolf pack defeated, Seong-ho reaches level 5, gaining additional effects for his special trait. Curious about the changes, he inspects the properties of his gate. The new feature renders the gate invisible to everyone else. Additionally, there is a projection effect that allows him to hear sounds from the location where the gate is projected. To test these functions, Sun-go immediately casts the gate. He discovers that he can view the interior of his house without physically traveling to the other side. The transparency proves effective, ensuring that no one will be able to detect his ability. Moving forward, previously, Seong-ho had worried about the possibility of accidentally crossing into a dungeon without knowing the threat level beforehand. However, thanks to the projection effect, that risk is now eliminated. The fact that this effect appeared at level 5 suggests that more rewards await him. As he reaches higher levels, he had never assumed that these early levels would hold such significant benefits. Nevertheless, he still has a substantial amount of work to complete, starting with the burial of the wolves he just killed. 2 days after subduing the wolves, the protagonist checks off several tasks. First, he travels to the other world and conducts another survey using his drone. Setting the radius to 1 kilometer, he locates various harmless animals. Even now, there are no sightings of goblins or kobolds. The area appears completely devoid of monsters. Next, Seong-ho aims to gather intelligence on the goblin nest, located 30 kilometers away. That specific nest is reportedly large enough to house numerous hobgoblins, meaning that defeating them will be a difficult challenge. Having gained confidence regarding the immediate safety of his location, Seong-ho feels it is the right time to begin expanding. He starts cutting down trees, clearing the area and flattening the ground to transform the hideout into a proper shelter base. Dingo proves to be the most valuable player, helping to create a large circle that acts as a boundary. Seong-ho prioritizes safety, setting up to full layers of barbed wire, fencing alongside a moat. He determines that he needs to dig the moat 2 meters deeper to maximize the combined effect with the wire. While working on these defenses, he utilizes the projected portal to watch television. The government has recently announced plans to carry out a formal investigation into awakeners. In the real world, Seong-ho actively purchases materials from hardware stores. He visits multiple home renovation shops to acquire tool sets on his way back home. He even takes the opportunity to spy on the rival group's hideout. Going a step further, Seong-ho rents a motorcycle and a mini excavator, intending to use the heavy machinery. Once he undergoes additional training, the small blue toad continues to provide excellent support. Seong-ho routinely injects small amounts of poison to build up resistance, eventually gathering enough toxin to coat a weapon of his choice. Back in his room, he finds himself completely shocked. He discovers that Survivor 1, a player with 4,500 hours of playtime, has joined the mission. This revelation leads Seong-ho to speculate about the connection to the Widow shootout. Alongside the government's suspicious control over the media, the president has been secluded in one location. While these events might appear coincidental on the surface, Seong-ho suspects a much deeper connection. His initial theory remains consistent. Survivor 1 is collaborating with the president to ensure his safety. He believes this collaboration exists because Survivor 1 possesses knowledge of the game's background story. Since Survivor 1 is known as an item collector, Seong-ho deduces that he likely demanded a massive shelter from the president in exchange for this intelligence. Furthermore, he seemingly chose the president as a partner to secure the highest possible leverage and authority. The situation is complicated. Seung-ho wonders if it is all a massive bluff, yet the involvement of the user My Dream does not quite fit into that narrative. His contemplation begins to cause a headache, but he eventually reaches a conclusion. If both Survivor 1 and My Dream are collaborating, then Seung-ho intends to alter his personal strategy as well in the following scene. Seung-ho creates a new account and VR identity. He worries about receiving a delayed response, which could postpone his plans, but My Dream replies almost immediately. Seung-ho assumes the user is likely unemployed, but focuses on verifying his legitimacy via VR chat. The chat initiates and My Dream joins the White Room. The two players confront each other. My Dream is particularly annoyed by Seung-ho's unknown alias, and the fact that he has chosen to wear a ridiculous duck face avatar. Seung-ho offers an indifferent apology. My Dream interprets the disguise as a sign that he is dealing with a veteran who wishes to conceal his identity. Though Seung-ho keeps him in the dark, My Dream decides to test him with 3 critical questions. Only after these are answered will he acknowledge the stranger. The first question concerns the maximum jump height of a werewolf, to which Seung-ho immediately answers 3 meters. He also correctly identifies the owlbear's weakness, noting that the answer is light. Finally, regarding the evolutionary stages of zombies, Seung-ho explains that, instead of merely possessing infection abilities, these zombies consume actual nutrients to function. Accumulating these nutrients allows them to evolve into ghouls. He adds that, interestingly, some even become enhanced zombies. Before reaching that stage, My Dream then poses a 4th question. Despite his initial claim that he would ask only 3, Seung-ho refuses to reveal the exact number of precursor events in the story. Upon hearing this refusal, the other player laughs, admitting that Seung-ho is indeed a true veteran. The protagonist becomes visibly annoyed and demands that the other user contact Survivor 1 to join the call immediately. However, he is informed that this is currently impossible. My Dream offers no explanation for the refusal, leading Seung-ho, currently using a duck-faced avatar, to openly call out the excuse as a lie. Changing the subject, the other user acts cryptically, tipping his hat and hinting that a significant event is imminent. Seung-ho begins to suspect the man might be unstable, feeling as though he is merely reciting filler dialogue to buy time. Suddenly a chill runs down his spine as the reality of the situation strikes him. My Dream abruptly disconnects from the chat, and Seung-ho realizes that the entire conversation was employed to trace his real-world location. At that exact moment, a man enters the internet cafe, accompanied by 2 security guards, and orders them to lock the doors. When the receptionist attempts to enforce the rule regarding payment for their time, the intruder aggressively grabs her arm, declaring that they are there to locate a specific individual rather than to play games. Seung-ho is troubled by this aggressive approach, as My Dream was known for maintaining a low profile and acting undercover. It is strange that he has chosen such an offensive tactic. Notably, the intruder possesses an ability reminiscent of mind control, which he uses to manipulate the receptionist. Realizing he is in a precarious situation, the protagonist knows he must escape immediately. If captured, he would likely be subjected to the same mental manipulation. Consequently, he rushes to the restroom and activates his dimensional gate ability. Meanwhile, the pursuer moves through the cafe indiscriminately, using his mental powers on the patrons to uncover Seung-ho's identity. Having searched every other area, he turns his attention to the restroom, supremely confident that his target is hiding within. As he kicks open each stall door, the intruder speculates whether his quarry is a stealth type assassin. Despite the potential awkwardness of interrupting an innocent bystander, My Dream remains focused, confident in his ability to handle stealth-based opponents. To detect any invisible presence, he splashes a bucket of water across the room to reveal uneven surfaces and flails his hands through the air, hoping to make physical contact. The protagonist had indeed summoned his gate, but he strategically positioned it flat against the wall. Ironically, the pursuer is currently standing directly in front of the portal, unable to see it due to its invisibility. Following his inspection, the intruder admits that his assumption about Seung-ho being a stealth user was incorrect. This leads him to a second conclusion: the target must be a movement specialist, resembling a discount version of Nanami. He orders his group to scan the entire area again, reminding his men that a substantial reward awaits them upon the target's capture. Observing the situation from the safety of his portal, Seung-ho reflects on the turn of events. He acknowledges that despite being wealthy in reality and humble within the game, he never wished for the situation to escalate. To this point, he mentally thanks My Dream for providing clarity to the situation. For some time Seung-ho had felt conflicted. But now, he is absolutely certain of his course of action. Deciding to reveal himself, he resolves to fight without restraint, no longer holding back from responding to violence, with equal force his opponent's size. Wondering where Seung-ho is, concealing himself, the man operates, under the assumption that Seung-ho is a movement-based user. Realizing that a veteran with so many accumulated hours would be difficult to track, suddenly the protagonist appears from behind, like a ghost to greet him. My dream spots him in the mirror. Just as Seung-ho lunges forward with a spear strike, the poisonous tip slashes the man's leg, and within seconds he succumbs. To its effects, the antagonist, who had been posturing arrogantly, meets his downfall due to a single slip-up. Without pausing to confirm the man's identity, Seung-ho slams his face into the wall, warning him not to turn around. He then mocks the man for the pain caused by the poison, currently coursing through his veins. Every time the man attempts to speak, Seung-ho harshly orders him to shut up next. Gripping his blade, Seung-ho points out that neither the apocalypse nor the tutorial has officially begun. He adds that the murderer system is effectively inactive. As well as he speaks, he slices through the belt holding the man's gun. Adopting a terrifyingly serious tone, Seung-ho brutally declares that he would face no penalty if he were to kill him right then and there. The blade hovers against the man's neck, forcing him to remain obediently silent. Seung-ho is impressed that the man finally knows how to keep his mouth shut. The opponent's body collapses, although he remains conscious. The poison renders him immobile for the time being. Seung-ho begins his interrogation, with the first question inquiring why the man was attempting to sell out Survivor 1, and targeting innocent people in the process. The man who had attempted to hunt others is now reduced to a paralyzed victim, a pathetic monster that could be farmed without lifting a finger. My dream curses at Seung-ho, who responds by confiscating the man's gun, stating that this is the price he must pay for even entertaining the idea of capturing him. Clutching his knife, Seung-ho issues a chilling threat, promising to actually kill the man if they ever encounter one another again. Following this confrontation, Seung-ho escapes the cafe well before the rest of the group arrives. He makes it home safely and immediately crosses into the other dimension. There he disassembles the gun and begins inspecting the man's identification card. The man's name is revealed to be Kwon Kyung-jun. He is in his late 30s, manages a golf club, and controls 3 bunkers through his business. Additionally, he appears to be a wealthy benefactor to multiple women, securing both romantic partners and financial resources. Regarding his abilities, Seung-ho assumes he possesses a powerful skill, given the extensive number of hours he spent on the game. It is clear to Seung-ho that the skill is related to mind control. All of this valuable information is now at Seung-ho's disposal. Of course, skills are not guaranteed to improve, simply because someone has spent a few thousand hours in the game. It is noted that even players who dedicate their lives to games, like Valorant or Counter-Strike, can spend 10,000 hours playing, yet remain stuck at the same skill level regardless. Seung-ho understands that the game has always prioritized survival above all else. Consequently, he views his own portal skill as essentially a cheat code for veterans. For the time being, he decides to treat this as a theory, until he is able to confirm the skills of another veteran player next. Seung-ho tests the gun, reflecting on the fact that the apocalypse is soon to arrive. Possessing absolute conviction about one specific detail, he proceeds through the forest, following Dingo's lead. Eventually, the dog barks, alerting him to an area of interest there. The lifeless bodies of police officers lie scattered alongside several goblins. Maintaining his composure, the protagonist checks on the condition of the bodies. It turns out that one of the officers is actually alive. Although he lacks fatal wounds, he is suffering from the effects of a paralysis poison. However, the more concerning detail is his missing weapon, though Seung-ho briefly considers the possibility that the officer never carried one to begin with. In any case, Seung-ho moves the bodies together and instructs the survivor to rest there for 30 minutes until the poison's effects subside. He then turns his attention to inspecting the goblin corpses. At first glance, he identifies multiple bullet holes, confirming that the police officers were indeed armed. The critical question remains, why is only the gun missing? After contemplating the situation, Seung-ho reaches a revelation, suspecting that this is the work of a gold goblin. This realization excites him, as he is eager to hunt the creature down himself. With a new plan established, the protagonist proceeds to dial emergency services on his phone. He also leaves a note detailing the precise location and providing instructions to bury the goblin corpses. Seung-ho understands that the public is already aware of monsters, rendering a stealthy approach pointless. Currently he is in a race against time, hoping that his small, lethal companion can assist him in a different location. A skirmish breaks out between a goblin and a non-awakened individual. The goblin dodges the man's swing and retreats. With 3 creatures remaining, the man questions his captain, asking if this is truly the correct method of handling the situation. He expresses confusion as to why he must act as a tanker when he possesses no abilities to begin with. The captain utilizes his skill, which grants him an advantage through psychokinesis. The only drawback is that the skill requires a significant amount of time to cast. The captain prepares a cluster of rocks and hurls them to crush the goblin's body. While he plays the role of support, his companion asks when the remaining party members are expected to arrive. The captain reveals that the rest of the party headed toward Gaya Mountain, but were apparently stopped and unable to ascend. This news comes as a shocking revelation to the ordinary man who lacks any abilities. The subordinate wishes to retreat, but his captain believes they should press forward. 3 goblins ambush the man and are on the verge of overwhelming him when rocks smash into their faces, diverting their attention. Fortunately, these goblins are not as physically strong as their counterparts in the game. The captain instructs his companion to keep pushing forward while maintaining composure. He believes that if they can handle the monsters and capture the hobgoblin group, they will secure a significant advantage. However, the psychokinesis user becomes so preoccupied with lecturing his partner that he lowers his guard and is struck by a goblin's mace. With his hand injured, he loses control over his ability. It is notable that a lowly goblin managed to outsmart him with a counter strategy, creating a situation that appears hopeless. Now completely defenseless, the pair is surrounded by the 3 goblins, who begin lunging from all directions. It seems to be the end for the amateurs, until a bolt suddenly pierces a goblin's head. A second and third shot follow immediately, injuring the remaining 2 creatures. Much to their confusion, the party of 2 has no idea what is transpiring. They stare into the dark forest, questioning where the arrows originated. The scene shifts to Seung-ho holding his combat bow. Initially he questions whether intervening and wasting ammunition was the correct move. However, Seung-ho is pleased that he was able to confirm vital information regarding the Awakeners. First, he learned that this group was prevented from ascending the mountain. Second, he observed that the group of goblins was already significantly weakened. Utilizing these pieces of intelligence, Seung-ho formulates his next plan. He has already devised a method to handle the goblin group. The strategy is straightforward. It revolves around provoking a goblin, which can be achieved by throwing a stone. After inciting the creature's rage, he intends to lure it toward the dimensional portal gate using simple cues. Once the goblin is sufficiently close to the gate, Xiang plans to launch an attack from the other dimension, utilizing the advantage of seeing through the gate, while remaining transparent to observers. As the first goblin is severely injured, its screams will attract the attention of its allies. Using the dimensional gate as a barrier, Seung-ho will forcibly retract his spear from the goblin's body, effectively erasing all physical evidence of his attack. Regarding the reaction of the hobgoblin, known for its high perception stat in the game, it will likely notice the dead subordinate and immediately suspect the other goblins of plotting against it. This will sow chaos and disharmony within the group, causing the subordinates to distance themselves from their leader. Seizing this opportunity, the calculating Seung-ho plans to materialize from the other side to decapitate them, maintaining the distinct advantage of the first strike. This process is intended to be repeated in the same fashion. His plan progresses smoothly at first, but a complication arises regarding the behavioral patterns of the remaining goblins. To his shock, Seung-ho faces an unexpected scenario. The hobgoblin turns to engage him, while the gold goblin flees with the loot, implying that a schism has occurred between the 2 monsters. This is bad news for the protagonist, who is now forced to attempt a desperate gamble. His immediate threat is the hobgoblin, who is closing the distance with alarming speed. With no other options available, Seung-ho does his best to block the powerful smash. Although he manages to block the direct hit, his body suffers from the shock of the impact and is thrown into a nearby tree. Now trembling and wounded, the situation looks dire for him. The hobgoblin wastes no time attempting to finish him off. Seung-ho knows that if he falls here, his demise is certain. The creature's mace swings toward him at full speed, aiming to crush his skull. At that critical moment, Seung-ho's declining health triggers the activation of his critical skill. survival instinct with his eyes flashing yellow. He reacts to the hobgoblin's assault. At point-blank range, however, instead of counter-attacking the monster, he executes a brilliant maneuver by dashing after the fleeing gold goblin. Utilizing the den he obtained from Kwon Kyung-jun, he aims at the creature's head and fires, killing the gold goblin instantly. Immediately following the kill, he summons the dimensional gate. Sung has achieved the first phase of his farming mission, but he still must contend with the hideous monster. Pursuing him, he brings the firearm into the melee fight and begins shooting the creature. Unable to withstand the firepower, the hobgoblin is overwhelmed. Sunho retaliates by slashing the creature across its body. With style, the monster screams as it dies, raising Sunho's level to 6 and netting him 16 points. Finally, his difficult quest is complete. He inspects a newly acquired skill called Terrain Sense, which allows him to perceive and respond to the surrounding geography. Interestingly consistent with previous events, the items he used or held during the battle have been upgraded into official system items. Realizing that a search party is approaching, he knows he cannot waste time. Having acquired his target, he manifests the dimensional gate and steps inside, intending to rest in his hideout until the search party departs. The following day, Sunho is woken up by his dog. He checks his watch and realizes that he slept for an entire day due to the severity of his injuries. Acknowledging the risks associated with survival instinct, he resolves to use it only in extreme situations. Before heading out on his next mission, he examines the loot he retrieved from the gold goblin. He lays the items on the table, revealing several revolvers, a dagger and other miscellaneous goods, proving the goblins were exceptional hoarders. While Sunho is satisfied with the revolvers, he considers the mithril knife he secured to be the true prize. This weapon possesses the attribute of permanent invariance rarity within the game. It stands as one of the few armaments capable of remaining unaffected by the approaching disease catastrophe. However, Young-ho is troubled by the question of how a mere goblin managed to acquire such a rare item, which typically costs a staggering 100 points. In the shop, upon inspecting every inch of the blade, he realizes that the weapon is actually flawed and imperfect. While contemplating this, he arrives at a realization. The goblins of this realm carry metal weaponry. Given their level of intelligence, it should be impossible for such creatures to manufacture these items independently. This raises the question of whether a sudden mutation occurred, altering the trajectory of their civilization. It implies the existence of even more intelligent goblins, perhaps researchers conducting experiments. Nevertheless, he acknowledges that this theory is currently baseless. He plans to verify it later, but for the moment, he is more interested in opening the small satchels, feeling as though he has won the lottery. Seong-ho retrieves a bunch of shade grapes. This unique fruit is known to enhance a person's night vision. Their presence explains why the goblins were able to move so easily at night. Opening the status window, the protagonist inspects his growth rate. He is quite pleased with the results, observing that his current progression is faster than it was in the game. With the basics concluded, Jun-ho decides it is time to return to the real world. Activating his ability, he steps through the portal. While scrolling through his phone, his device begins buzzing incessantly. The moment he regains a signal, Hyung-jun, Mik-young, and even Suyeon have all sent messages to check on his status. Receiving such attention leads him to wonder if he has become a popular figure. His first destination is the fitness center. In the subsequent scene, Sunho opens the door to meet his friends. Before he can even greet them, they rush toward him, relieved to see that he is safe and in one piece. Curious, the protagonist inquires about the unfamiliar faces present. Hyung-jun brings them forward, introducing the new individuals as his party members. Lee Kyung-hoon and Kim Bora greet him politely as they exchange pleasantries. Sunho had expected at least one additional member, but it turns out that this person is currently busy purchasing camping gear at a discount store. He is astonished to learn that such a place exists, prompting Mik-young to intervene and confirm that it is a very modern establishment that opened recently. The gym director then asks if Sunho is up to date regarding the incident on the news. Sunho confirms that he is, stating that he is caught up on everything via MeTube. A suggestion is made regarding the possibility of establishing a channel there as well. Meanwhile, the same doctor who performed the autopsy on the goblin from Gaea Mountain has entered a state of panic, issuing a public warning for everyone to prepare for the coming apocalypse. Additionally, the president holds a national meeting, announcing that the government is making every effort to verify the location of the game's creator. Hyung-jun inquires about Sunho's next major objective. The entire party has gathered at this location, specifically because of Seung-ho's extensive knowledge of the game. However, Kyung-hoon appears irritated that Hyung-jun continues to seek advice, pointing out that he had already explained that goblins obviously yield points. He argues that if an awakener kills a monster, they would instantly jump from level 1 to level 2, implying that the primary objective should simply be to stockpile supplies. Seung-ho watches the man speak confidently, despite being completely incorrect, unaware of the magnitude of his error. Addressing him directly, Seung-ho reveals that his assertions are entirely false. The arrogant individual interrupts him, asking if he has ever played the game, and behaving like an obstinate internet user, incapable of listening to an opposing opinion. To protect his identity, Seung-ho maintains that he has not played. However, this admission is sufficient for the man to dismiss him, asserting that blindly trusting the community is unwise. Bora, the other female member, turns to ask the man a question. She is deeply curious about the mechanics of zombie spores and quizzes him on how the infection propagates, demanding to know if there are any specific conditions involved in the process. In response, the man makes the ridiculous claim that anyone who has ever made contact with an awakener will not turn into a zombie, a statement that stands out as incredibly bizarre. Slamming his hand on the table, Kyung-hoon stands up to assert his dominance. Relying solely on his status as an awakener, he believes his experience is absolute, claiming that even casual, non-awakened players would automatically be safe from the spores simply by interacting with him. Although the claim is baseless, Bora is somehow easily convinced, clinging to him as if he were a genuine expert. Mi-kyung then interjects with her own question, inquiring if the man has managed to clear the difficult tutorial. Kyung-hoon interrupts her immediately, emphasizing that he will protect her, and insisting there is nothing to worry about. In Seung-ho's view, this pretentious individual is becoming increasingly aggravating. While he gives Kyung-hoon a minimal amount of credit regarding the theory he understands, there is absolutely no evidence suggesting awakened people possess complete immunity from the spores. Seung-ho considers the entire conversation futile due to the presence of this one individual, and finally realizes why Hyung-jun had called him over. Deciding to ignore the troll and his antics, the protagonist stands up to leave, even as both of his friends urge him to remain. Seung has no interest in sharing his knowledge with the troll, like the man at the gym, so he bids the group farewell, intending to meet them again at a later time. Upon leaving the fitness club, he identifies several locations where he can farm points before the Iron Death disease arrives. He is particularly interested in visiting the camping gear store that his friends had mentioned eventually. After finalizing his plans, he arrives in front of his house, only to spot the elegant Suyen. She has been waiting patiently to give him something. Seong produces a first aid kit, which actually contains a pack of painkillers and various antibiotics that are impossible to purchase without a prescription. Seung-ho is genuinely stunned by her special gift and the thoughtfulness of her gesture. The doctor also reveals her address, having already written it down inside the pouch. Once again, the protagonist is confused as to why she is going to such lengths, but Suyen believes it is only natural to share her location. In exchange for knowing his, bidding him farewell, she hurries off to attend her appointment with the director. As she walks away, she suddenly remembers one last detail. Seong smiles and reminds him that he needs to pay for the medicine, implying that she provided her address for that specific reason. Upon hearing this, Seung-ho is completely bewildered, unable to decipher Seong's intentions or read her behavior in the slightest. Following their parting, time passes quickly. During those hours, the protagonist traverses the city, collecting various items from different stores. He proceeds to construct a proper storage facility, and after installing sandwich panels, he is ready to load his supplies inside. He also begins utilizing the rented mini excavator to its full potential for his construction work. Eventually, the global situation becomes increasingly critical. Public chaos, political confusion, arguments over the truth, and debates among skeptics escalate. These factors lead to an emergency UN meeting regarding the US president's planned visit to Korea. Finally, the HSA detects something previously unfathomable. On top of the unfolding events, the asteroid destined to trigger the zombie era is blazing its way toward Earth. 4 days later, Seung-ho finds himself at Gamcheon Port, gazing at the beautiful oceanic scenery. This location is where the final backstory event, known as the Russian ship incident, is set to occur. After ensuring that absolutely no one is around, Seung-ho enters an abandoned building to finalize his preparations. There he cast open the gate, explaining his reasoning for coming to this location. Despite the high probability of turning into a zombie, his primary objective is to retrieve a variety of firearms from the vessel. He understands that the zombie spores function as pathogens carried by particle beams, making them nearly impossible to evade. To someone living without family, transforming into the undead at this moment versus 5 days later makes little difference. Shungo acknowledges that he could permanently relocate to the alternate dimension with Dingo, but doing so would strip his human existence of all meaning. Finalizing his preparations, he begins his mission, clarifying that this is not a suicidal endeavor. Instead, he is making a bold decision that few others would dare to consider, opting for a high-risk path to secure greater rewards. Viewing this as the essence of life, reviewing the game's patch notes regarding this specific narrative arc, he assumes the 10-point weapon mentioned is in Ebony Club. However, he questions how weak the zombies will be at this early stage. The notes also mention point fluctuations following the asteroid's impact. The sheer confidence and detail within the text convince him that the game's creator had foreknowledge of these events. While checking his phone, the situation deteriorates rapidly. He receives an emergency alert, warning of a tsunami associated with the third precursor phenomenon. Shortly after, the waves breached the shoreline, rising higher with each surge. Far out at sea, a ship is violently tossed about by the rough waters. Seong-ho realizes the city has flooded, leaving him with a binary choice: combat monsters or face the zombies observing the vessel. He reflects on the sense of hopelessness humans experience in the face of natural disasters. Nevertheless, he must navigate this chaos and execute his plan, using his boat, sprinting at full speed while carrying his craft. Seong-ho leaps directly off a building, aware that time is of the essence. He needs to conclude his business before government agents arrive on the scene. A while later, he successfully anchors to the ship. Thus far, everything is proceeding smoothly. He confirms that awakeners are immune to zombification, realizing that Kyung-hoon's theory was surprisingly accurate. In fact, Shungo feels no adverse effects whatsoever. Encouraged by this, he climbs the ladder to initiate the second phase of his operation. Once aboard, he finds zombies lurking on the deck. He calls out to them, deliberately drawing their attention. He is dressed in shorts, wielding a shield and a mace resembling a Power Ranger. The zombies from the game possessed unique properties. While they could not transmit the virus to infect others, they viewed everything around them as prey. Additionally, they had the ability to grow stronger in proportion to the nutrients they consumed. Seong-ho charges directly at the zombies, smashing one of them with his shield. After tackling the first creature, he readies his mace and strikes the zombie's jaw, effectively crushing its face and altering its appearance permanently. Surprised by how easily the two enemies fell, Seong-ho wonders if the zombies have been significantly weakened compared to their game counterparts. He receives 2 points for the kills, and recalls that it previously required at least 2 or more hits to eliminate a zombie, whereas now a single strike suffices. However, remembering the incident with the orcs, he refuses to lower his guard. He acknowledges that making such a mistake twice would likely cost him his life. Next, Seong-ho inspects the hallway and discovers a group of zombies trapped inside. Seeing some of them wandering about, he advances quickly, dispatching them left and right with ease. His primary objective is to locate a pistol, so he heads toward the wheelhouse. Suddenly, a gunshot rings out. Shocking him completely, he finds it hard to believe that anyone could have managed to survive the infestation on the ship. Sprinting toward the source of the noise, Seong-ho admits that non-awakeners can sometimes get lucky and survive the spores. Through contact with awakeners, his priority becomes saving this person to gather more intelligence. However, upon his arrival, he finds the man is already dead. The deceased individual clutches a photograph of a loved one in his hands. Although this survivor failed to become a hero, in this story his demise benefits Seong-ho, who takes the man's gun for himself. He lays the body out flat for a proper rest. Before exiting the room, Seong-ho realizes he must become accustomed to such sights, as tragedy will soon become commonplace. He accepts the natural reality that he may eventually have to kill other humans to maximize his own chances of survival. While untying his boat's anchor, Seong-ho is astonished to see someone approaching on a jet ski. This confirms that just like him, another player has arrived to farm points. They cross paths, but the protagonist leaves the ship with his necessary loot, paying little attention to the newcomer, heading toward the danger. Early the following morning, the news reports the disappearance of the game developer, who cannot be located for questioning. Since receiving proof of the zombies' existence, the president has been taking continuous, decisive action. Song-ho notes that the country's leader appears to think in a manner very similar to his own. Recalling one final task, the protagonist calls Lee Woo-byum, an administrator at the countermeasure headquarters. Immediately he drops the bombshell regarding the exact time the doomsday event will begin. To verify his identity, Sung-ho mentions the gunshot wounds he inflicted on the hobgoblin. Woo-byum is startled to realize he is speaking to the same player. Sung-ho instructs him to record critical details, rapidly specifying the exact date, the exact hour, and even a scenario. Regarding a package arriving in the afternoon, Sung-ho hopes that the countermeasures department utilizes the new intelligence effectively, and wishes them luck in the impending war. The president has executed a highly decisive maneuver. On community forums, people have begun to realize that the situation is deteriorating rapidly. Speculation is circulating that the internet and electricity will not last much longer. Though Sung-ho views these opinions with a degree of skepticism, he remains unsure if all these predicted events will truly come to pass. However, an official announcement is soon broadcast, instructing citizens to stockpile sufficient food and water for 4 days, and to return to their families. The military begins active patrols, demanding that the public cease all activities. Immediately it is stated that a formal declaration will be issued by July 20th. Observing these developments, Young-ho considers this to be the perfect response. He feels a pang of regret for not informing the public sooner about the coming state of the world. He reflects that had he known the government would handle the situation this competently, he would have utilized his trait to its full potential from the beginning. Although it appears to be a significant missed opportunity, Song-ho copes by admitting that he likely could not have prevented the disaster. Regardless, he decides there is no point in dwelling on what might have happened, focusing instead on keeping his own promise. He reaffirms that he is not a hero of justice, nor does he aspire to be one. He is simply an ordinary man. Subsequently, the implementation of lockdowns and quarantines shakes the global status quo, making travel impossible. Consequently, Seong-ho spends his days within the alternate dimension. 3 days prior to the start of the apocalypse, he finished his digging work, albeit at a slow pace. He also downloads and archives numerous videos regarding cooking and farming, anticipating the imminent loss of internet access. 2 days before the apocalypse, he scouts the surrounding area with Dingo, and feels fortunate to discover several golden apples. This discovery leads him to wonder if the entire location is enchanted, or blessed with exceptional fertility. A final issue arises just 1 day before the apocalypse. Sung-ho discovers that 2 packs of sweet potato jellies are missing from his storage, replaced by a single dried grape. His immediate assumption is that Dingo ate the jellies, but the honest dog shakes his head, denying any involvement. Seong-ho adopts a teasing and forceful tone to extract the truth, but the poor creature wails and cries in an effort to prove his innocence. Seong-ho eventually realizes that his small companion was not the culprit, implying someone else is responsible. He decides to review the CCTV footage to determine what actually occurred. Upon checking his laptop, Seong-ho is astonished to discover a swarm of beetles invading the premises through the doggy door. They had taken the jelly and left the grape behind as a form of payment, a sight that was undeniably adorable. The beetle actually turns to bow in gratitude toward the camera, indicating that these small creatures possess remarkable intelligence. Sung-ho's curiosity is piqued, and he develops a strong desire to interact with a few of them. However, as a safety precaution, he locks the pet door, an action that visibly saddens Dingo. He cannot remain in the other world any longer due to upcoming appointments with guests, so he opens the dimensional portal and returns. In the following scene, Sung-ho is seated with his friends and key party members, expressing surprise that they all managed to arrive safely. Despite the strict lockdown, he notices another unfamiliar face and learns that this new man is the final addition to the team. This handsome individual is identified as Yoo Hyun, who is already an awakener. Although he possesses little knowledge of the game, he is an electrical engineering student with significant practical experience. Sung-ho appreciates this addition to the group and introduces himself as a non-awakener. Their initial interaction is mutually polite. Sung-ho intends to address the critical matters swiftly. He requests that everyone share their intelligence, one by one, beginning with Hyung-jun. Hyung-jun starts by recounting an incident involving his ex-wife, noting that their phone line was cut during a conversation concerned. He went looking for his daughter, but on his return trip, he observed barricades being erected on the highway. Through his investigation, Young Jun discovered that authorities were attempting to evacuate citizens residing near the petrochemical complex. Next, the elegant doctor takes her turn, sharing a crucial piece of information. Song witnessed a shelter being constructed in the local park, a shocking but verified reality. Mickey Young speaks next, explaining that while she was at the market, she heard reports about high-ranking officials opposing the president's decisions. Reportedly, all the officials who protested were subsequently detained. Seung-ho realizes that these findings are far more valuable than he had initially assumed. The end is approaching, and the president's stance appears clear. He is evidently aware of what is about to occur. The major question remains why Seung-ho chose to ask for their input individually. This strategy was employed because within a network, it is crucial to establish corresponding reasoning based on the information provided by others. While he could simply reveal himself as a veteran to persuade them, doing so would place him at significant personal risk. Seung-ho begins to speak, urging everyone to pay close attention to his next words. He then boldly declares that the president's ultimate goal is to engineer a controlled apocalypse. This statement immediately stuns every person in the room. Seung-ho supports his logic by citing the unexplained lockdowns and the sudden suspension of operations at all national facilities. He argues that there is only one reason the government would implement such drastic changes in such a short period. Putting the pieces together, he realizes that the end is imminent. Soo-young quickly grasps the situation, deducing that the government must already be confident of the exact date the apocalypse will unleash. Seung-ho confirms this suspicion and identifies July 20th as the likely date. In a state of panic, Yoo-hyun stands up to inform his family, but the protagonist shouts at him to stop. He is determined to prevent the group from losing their composure. Although it may sound cruel, he emphasizes that individual survival takes precedence over family concerns in this scenario. Seung-ho coldly reminds everyone in the room that any one of them could transform into a zombie starting the following day, meaning the terror of death is looming over all of them. Addressing the core issue, he produces a stack of files and acknowledges the true reason he gathered them. There he reveals that he possesses a strategy for the tutorial phase, along with detailed information regarding the survival aspects of what is to come. When Hyung-jin questions the source of this intelligence, Seung-ho claims he acquired it by watching streams. He also apologizes to Mickey Young for lying previously, though she accepts it without issue, noting that she had done the same to him. Thanks to these files, the group can utilize the information according to their specific needs. At the same time, Seung-ho implores them to adhere strictly to the manual to ensure they clear the tutorial phase. Following their meeting, midnight arrives. This marks the final day of peace before the world descends into hell. Seung-ho has spent 32 consecutive days preparing, leveling up in every possible domain to improve his odds. Nevertheless, he perceives imperfections in his plan and worries that his anonymous status could eventually lead to his downfall. Despite these doubts, the valiant young man holds no regrets, having acted with confidence. Seung-ho observes as his country launches missiles at the approaching asteroid, successfully making contact with the foreign object. He questions whether the end of the world is truly the ultimate, unavoidable fate for humanity. The apocalypse officially begins. Morning arrives, and with it, the lockdowns are lifted. All of Seung-ho's preparation work is complete, including the installation of bulletproof glass and high-strength durable doors. He then follows his usual routine of injecting a small dose of poison to hone his resistance capabilities. Following this, he engages in a workout, performing 301 arm push UPS, while under the influence of the toxin, displaying a work ethic that rivals even the strongest fictional heroes. Seung-ho changes into his combat gear, looking impressive. Before sharing breakfast with his dog, he waits for the 9 p.m. announcement, briefly dozing off in the process. Suddenly the hour arrives and the television turns on. The president sits before the nation to deliver an overwhelming message, declaring martial law and announcing the closure of roads. Among other measures, Seung-ho feels moved and impressed by the president's decisions, believing that no other leader could have provided the country with a more dignified conclusion. Witnessing the somber state of the leader, he clutches the remote, struggling to accept the ultimate, and nevertheless, he acknowledges that this fate cannot be avoided. It is a reality that humanity must endure and survive. However, this time, Seung-ho will not enter the apocalypse as a novice, but as a veteran possessing comprehensive knowledge. 4 hours remain until the spores are scheduled to make contact. He spends 2 of those hours in the alternate dimension, checking on the items farmed and stored in his warehouse. Back in the real world, he sets up the necessary equipment to handle the days following the onset of the Iron Death disease. While he is occupied in the other world, humanity begins to collapse. Chaos runs rampant as civilians fight and harm one another, with general apathy toward order taking hold. In one instance, an overweight man wanders the streets, exposing himself seemingly resigned to death. Before being struck by a car and killed, some individuals appear to enjoy killing others without remorse, confirming that the world is truly coming to an end. The blonde man behind the wheel shows no concern for the pedestrian he just killed. His friend remarks that getting rid of the car is acceptable, reasoning that the Iron Death disease will soon wipe out all vehicles regardless. Another man points his bat toward the rooftop, calling out the person silently spying on them. He harbors a personal grudge against the protagonist and expresses a desire to kill Seung-ho to farm points. Seung-ho is confused by the man's arrogant attitude, but his attention is drawn to flyers falling from the sky. Even on the brink of the apocalypse, the government continues to show concern for its people. Seung-ho finds this altruism amazing. Noting the contrast with his own ruthless selfishness regarding personal survival, he realizes that, if more people acted in the interest of others, dealing with the apocalypse would be significantly easier. Crushing the paper in his hand, he reflects that this is an unrealistic standard. He resolves to focus solely on returning to his preparations. In the next scene, barely 3 minutes remain until the spores make contact with the world. Seung-ho has collected numerous air tanks, questioning whether the quantity will suffice before the disease takes full control. He has already committed every resupply route within the city to memory. Glancing at his watch, he briefly considers the consequences of forgetting to remove it, but he quickly dismisses the thought, realizing he is worrying excessively. Choosing to keep matters simple, he dons his helmet as the clock strikes 1 p.m. The spores make contact with the world, stealing his resolve. Seung-ho kickstarts his motorcycle, hoping his plans will proceed without error. The narrative shifts to the onset of the infection. As the spores begin to affect the general population, vitality is drained from the victims, leaving behind only flesh-eating corpses. These growling purplish monsters are instantly attracted to specific sounds. Seung-ho speeds past several zombies, surprised to find that the area is not heavily populated with them. This is fortunate, resulting from the fact that most infected individuals remained indoors, perishing alongside their families. The only aspect that intrigues him is the prospect of finding a survivor who is not turned nevertheless. The situation appears manageable. Spotting a clear path, he takes a shortcut, prioritizing the avoidance of zombies while he is focused on gathering resources. Fortunately, the shops still have their shutters secured. This allows him to easily shatter the glass with his sledgehammer, which he proceeds to do before entering. Seung-ho summons the portal, aware that speed is essential. He seizes necessary items, understanding that it will take some time for the spores to establish full mental control over the zombies. His optimal strategy is to raid the hardware store before the zombies can coordinate an assault, thereby avoiding unnecessary combat. Consequently, he tosses everything he can reach into the portal, effectively flooding his dog's vicinity with a massive quantity of medicine. With the pharmacy completely emptied, Seung-ho assesses his progress and realizes he is moving significantly faster than anticipated. However, this assumption is challenged when he arrives at the hardware store and discovers double layers of security measures. He had predicted this obstacle, which is precisely why he brought the tanks. Seung-ho activates the focused heat of the oxygen cutter. A minor problem arises. The equipment is excessively loud and begins to attract nearby zombies. Scanning his surroundings, Seung-ho recalls that although their tracking senses were diminished in the game, they still required only a few moments to locate the source of the noise. An entire horde surrounds him, signaling his potential doom. Because he had encountered this exact situation before, during the Russian ship event, Seung-ho was fully prepared. These particular monsters were still in their initial stage of development. Since they were only focused on consuming nutrients, fighting them off was a rather simple task. Charging forward at top speed, he swung his mace with absolute confidence in his own strength. A heavy strike easily took down the first creature. He knew that as long as the weak spots were targeted, even a complete beginner could handle them. When 2 additional enemies rushed him, he crushed one skull and destroyed the other with a single, sweeping blow. Compared to his past experiences, the real-world difficulty of these enemies felt significantly reduced. Farming them became an effortless routine, especially since every successful kill rewarded him with 2 points. Dealing with the rest of the crowd, however, presented a different challenge. Normally his go-to strategy involved pulling the horde into a narrow alleyway to prevent getting surrounded. Unfortunately, his current objectives strictly limited his mobility. Realizing he had an oxygen cutter on hand, he decided the most effective approach was to wipe them all out simultaneously. He used his shield to block the approaching mob, while confidently stating that his earlier avoidance was strictly to save valuable farming time, not out of fear. He firmly declared that he was never scared of them, while actively crushing their faces. Provoked by his bold claims, the entire group leapt at him all at once. Using his incredible speed, however, he managed to dodge their coordinated attack, effortlessly having poured 5,500 hours of his life into that terrible game. He knew he was completely out of their league. Without any advanced ghouls in the mix, he found the idea of a disorganized mob defeating him totally ridiculous. He quickly wiped out the remaining enemies in front of him with a heavy shield bash, genuinely enjoying the chaotic spectacle. To finish off the performance, he ignited the blowtorch, eager to incinerate the neat pile of dead bodies he had just created. Once the massive battle concluded, Shangho gathered his newly acquired supplies from the hardware shop and headed straight for the local police station. Upon arriving, he discovered that the weapon storage had already been completely emptied by others, making him feel like a player arriving too late to the loot in a survival video game. Surprisingly, he did not feel upset for long. He soon stumbled upon a dead body, wearing a loaded backpack. Checking inside, he uncovered a fantastic stash of firearms, tasers, and communication radios. His journey then smoothly transitioned to his fourth target area. Everything proceeded perfectly. By relying on a recently acquired detection ability and his high stats in perception and handiwork, he managed to slip quietly past the wandering zombies without drawing any unwanted attention. By the time the undead started figuring out how to form groups, the young man had successfully reached a local motorcycle shop. Finding the place completely stripped of inventory, he noticed a single ATV left behind and immediately loaded his gathered supplies onto it. Taking a moment to assess his current status, he slipped back into his private dimension. This quick detour allowed him to rest and clear any negative physical effects. Once again, he recognized that his unique portal power gave him a massive unfair advantage. After stepping back into reality, he stood there, trying to decide where he should head next. Suddenly, two hostile strangers noticed him. They began to mock him, assuming he was a completely ordinary person, without any special abilities. The situation escalated quickly when the main bully cruelly launched a lightning strike directly at the young man's lower body, jumping backward to protect himself. He realized this attacker's strange fixation on him was crossing a dangerous line. While the second thug stood guard to keep the surrounding zombies away, the protagonist evaluated his options and prepared his portal for a counterattack. He debated if he should just eliminate them entirely, knowing the fight would be incredibly easy. As the aggressive blonde man walked toward him with supreme confidence, the young man mentally reviewed the rules of the game's tutorial phase. He figured that the system probably would not label him a murderer at this early stage. Furthermore, even if the penalty was already active, a player's first kill only ever resulted in a minor system warning. Relying on his invisible portal, he vanished and reappeared right behind his enemy, leaving the blonde man deeply confused. Although taking the man's life would have been effortless, he still felt uncomfortable with the dark reality of committing an actual murder. Instead, he simply placed his attacker in a tight chokehold. Feeling the sudden grab, the bully finally understood that his target also possessed awakened abilities. When asked about the reason behind his unprovoked hostility, the man gave a ridiculous explanation. He claimed he had stolen the young man's girlfriend, insisting he had even seen them together in bed in the past. Disgusted by the nonsense, the protagonist kicked the guy to the ground and delivered what he called his final warning. He stated clearly that he lived by a strict rule of never harming innocent people. Rejecting this moral high ground, the fallen attacker just laughed. He argued that they were exactly the same, claiming they were both just selfish individuals, looking out for themselves. Without any hesitation, the blonde man fired his weapon once more. However, the young man dodged the attack with incredible ease and perfect timing. Rather than arguing, he completely agreed with his attacker's cynical worldview, since the thug had openly admitted how terrible they both were. The protagonist no longer felt any guilt or hesitation about taking a life. Grabbing the man by the head, he calmly assured his enemy that they were indeed both garbage for a long time. Shangho had avoided accepting this harsh reality, but he finally took action by completely shattering his attacker's jaw. although he had died in over 100 combat matches within the game. Taking a human life in the real world made his body tremble in a completely unfamiliar way. Shortly after the second cowardly attacker approached, instead of striking him down, the protagonist simply warned the man to look behind him. A group of zombies was already launching an ambush. As the creatures tore the man apart, he pleaded desperately for assistance. However, Shang-ho completely ignored the cries. Focusing entirely on his own desire for self-preservation, he firmly believed that ruthless individuals like these attackers simply did not deserve mercy. In this ruined world, this violent encounter brought to mind the murderer system from the game Sora. To discourage users from ruining the experience for others, the developers introduced this mechanic 3 months after the official release. While the core idea was positive, the actual rules were terrible because the creators were afraid of losing their player base. A person's first kill only resulted in a basic warning. Severe penalties were not enforced until a third murder was committed. Furthermore, if a second kill happened without clear intent, the system would investigate the context before passing judgment, allowing many people to easily exploit the loopholes. Despite the risks, users actively chose the path of a murderer to steal money, increase their stats, and take special abilities from others. Driven by greed for these unique powers, psychotic players turned an ordinary survival game into their personal hunting ground. Naturally, taking this dark path came with heavy consequences. Once someone was officially labeled a murderer, they were forced to continue killing to survive. Eventually, they would be trapped inside a death field. This unavoidable arena could be triggered when 3 or more regular players formed a barrier, forcing everyone inside to fight to the death. While it might seem like the killer would have the upper hand, the late stages of the game were filled with highly skilled veterans who would easily team up to destroy these rogue players. Normally, the system caused a person to hear a very specific heartbeat sound the moment they were officially branded a murderer. However, Zhang-ho noticed that his heart sounded completely normal. Right now, this lack of a physical reaction confirmed his earlier theory. Because the official tutorial had not yet begun, the game's penalty system was not active yet. Realizing that the tutorial had not yet officially started, Xiangho figured he had a brief window of a few hours where he could eliminate others without facing any system penalties. He quickly pushed the idea away, however, acknowledging that going on a random killing spree would be pure madness instead of losing his mind. He chose to stay focused on his actual goals. He lived by a very specific rule of punishing unfairness with equal ruthlessness, meaning he would only take a human life if it aligned with his strict personal principles. While tossing his gathered loot into his portal, he firmly reminded himself of this boundary. By late afternoon, around 4 p.m., the young man found himself observing a warehouse, surrounded by a persistent crowd of infected. The zombies refused to leave the area because they were attracted to the noise of 2 human groups arguing loudly inside. Both sides were threatening each other for control of the building, but nobody wanted to step outside into the monster-filled streets. One survivor openly mocked a man wearing a red hoodie, doubting he had the courage to actually shoot his weapon. Deeply insulted, the man in the red hoodie fired his crossbow, striking his opponent right in the shoulder. He bragged about his sharpshooting skills from the video game and proudly declared that the apocalypse was all about the survival of the fittest. Left with no other options, the injured man and his companions were forced to evacuate. However, before running away in the opposite direction, the departing group decided to leave a nasty surprise for their attackers. They banged wildly on the warehouse doors, intentionally drawing the entire zombie horde toward the people trapped inside. Watching this unfold from a distance, Xiang was incredibly impressed by the clever revenge tactic. He found the situation so amusing that he made a mental note to reward the injured man if they ever crossed paths again. With his scavenging mission mostly complete, only his apartment and a military zone remained unchecked, since there was barely an hour left before the tutorial began. Soon Ho decided to adjust his plans. After taking a quick trip to his alternate dimension to organize his affairs, he focused on his next major target. Typically, places packed with food, like grocery stores, were extremely dangerous because zombies gathered there to consume nutrients. While average survivors avoided these locations at all costs, experienced veterans saw them as perfect hunting grounds. Hoping to reach level 10 and unlock the system shop before the tutorial started, Sung-ho began pouring gasoline all over the supermarket's lot. His strategy was straightforward: gather as many monsters as possible and blow them up for a massive amount of experience points. Yet just as he finished setting up the trap, a sudden realization hit him. The upcoming phase of the apocalypse would naturally flood the entire area with oil anyway, leaving him to wonder if he had just wasted his valuable fuel for absolutely nothing. Instead of dwelling on the wasted fuel, the young man figured the setup was worth it, just to let his dog enjoy the exercise. Since they still had a brief window before the official tutorial started, he gave Dingo the signal to carry out their rehearsed strategy. Moving with incredible speed and agility, the small dog sprinted past the distracted, feeding monsters without any trouble. Once Dingo aggressively pushed a door open, the entire undead crowd shifted their focus and began chasing the animal. Seeing his pet perform perfectly, the young man waited until Dingo safely vanished into the dimensional gateway. Immediately after, he tossed a lit lighter onto the gasoline-covered ground, causing a massive explosion that instantly wiped out the confused creatures. Thanks to that massive group elimination, his rank jumped straight to level 11. This victory rewarded him with 116 points and unlocked a brand new storage skill for his special trait as evening approached. He completed his scavenging run, collecting groceries from the supermarket and taking several computer towers. Realizing the surrounding structures would soon be destroyed anyway, he opened his portal right in the middle of the street. He then wheeled his motorcycle inside, fully aware that the vehicle would be entirely useless in the real world. From now on, back in his alternate dimension, he headed to a practice area, located roughly a kilometer away from his main shelter. To prepare for the next disaster, he swapped his outfit for completely non-metallic gear, putting on a fiber-based protective vest and a basic helmet. Without any metal zippers or buckles on his clothes, he felt surprisingly comfortable and fully equipped. As the countdown dropped to just 3 minutes, a creepy sensation washed over him. He had previously deduced that both the deadly human spores and the upcoming metal-destroying plague were carried by the wind. Since his gateway only allowed him and his personal belongings to pass through, he knew he had to be extremely careful. With both threats surrounded by wooden practice targets, he tried to push his anxiety away, reasoning that if his equipment somehow failed, he would simply have to sprint to a safe zone. With only 3 seconds remaining, he opened his portal one last time to observe the outside world. The devastating iron disease finally swept across the nation, instantly annihilating everything in its path. Massive skyscrapers collapsed into dust, and city towers were completely torn apart. Watching the destruction unfold from the safety of his gateway, he witnessed the exact reason why human society would never be able to rebuild. In a matter of moments, the metal-eating plague threw civilization back to the Stone Age, wiping out any remaining hope for humanity. Although the young man had mentally braced himself, witnessing the disaster unfold firsthand was far more horrifying than he had anticipated. Suddenly, a massive blast rocked the area. Initially, he assumed a weapons facility had detonated, but his immediate concern quickly shifted to the condition of his iron beads. Fortunately, the items remained completely untouched. However, this brief moment of relief quickly vanished, because the reality of the disaster was still overwhelmingly grim. Shutting his dimensional gateway, he forced himself to suppress his emotions and focus strictly on executing his survival strategy. When he returned to his base, a surprising sight awaited him. The tiny beetles from before were standing there, eagerly holding out a root. It seemed they wanted to make amends or offer a trade for what they had previously taken. When he asked if they were proposing an exchange, one of the insects actually nodded in confirmation. He tried to maintain a strict and intimidating attitude, but their undeniable cuteness quickly melted his resolve. Softening his tone, he explained that he did not need food and preferred unique items instead. Deep down, he assumed their tiny minds could never grasp such a complex request. To his absolute astonishment, the red beetle picked up a small twig and began writing in the soil, clearly offering to trade or for sweet potato jelly. Thrilled by the proposal, he eagerly accepted. Yet, when he reached out to finalize the deal, the little creature slapped his hand away. The bugs then gathered in a tight circle to discuss the terms. Before the red leader finally approved the agreement, unexpectedly a system notification appeared, requiring a formal contract to validate their trade. This process was entirely different from how he had bonded with his dog, leading him to conclude that creatures with such high intelligence could not simply be tamed as pets. The document outlined the specific conditions and named all involved parties in a highly professional manner. Having nothing to lose, the young man signed the paperwork, which officially linked the beetles to him as contracted partners as the bugs prepared to scatter and fetch the promised ore. He hurried into his storage room. He returned with extra sweet potato jelly, offering it to his new companions as an upfront bonus. The insects rejoiced, thrilled to have formed a partnership with such a generous human. While encouraging them to enjoy the treat and return with valuable goods, he jokingly warned that he would track them to the ends of the earth if they ever dared to break their promise. Before the notoriously oppressive tutorial stage officially began, Xiangho carefully calculated his next moves and organized his gathered resources. Among the impressive items he had scavenged from others was a ceramic knife, which was highly valuable because it was completely immune to the metal destroying plague. Although he had no intention of actively hunting other survivors, he realized the importance of thoroughly searching their abandoned bases for useful equipment. After putting away his newly acquired gear, he connected a computer tower and a hard drive he had recently taken from a complex to scan their contents. While browsing through numerous media files, he stumbled upon a surprising discovery: a professional modeling photograph of Mick Young. This revelation proved she had been an idol, which perfectly explained her unusually attractive appearance that always made her stand out. Choosing to respect her privacy, he quietly deleted the image, while thinking back on the moments they had spent together. Once he finished with the computer, the young man turned his attention to the rewards he had earned for reaching level 10. By calling out for the shop window, a familiar blue digital interface materialized before him. While it looked exactly like the store from the video game, he noticed that the item prices had slightly changed. He decided to purchase the 6th and 11th items on the list. When they magically appeared right in front of him, it confirmed that the game's mechanics were fully functioning in reality. This realization made him wonder if he could take advantage of a specific glitch he remembered from the original game's tutorial. Following this, he tested his newly acquired dimensional slot power. This skill granted him a quick access inventory system consisting of 5 tiny storage cubes. By simply calling out the specific slots, the cubicles appeared before him. He quickly realized the incredible value of this ability. Instead of carrying heavy loads or constantly opening his main portal, he could effortlessly store and retrieve his most important gear on the go. Recognizing how overpowered this advantage would be for his future growth, he filled all 5 slots with his preparations complete. He instructed his dog Dingo to guard the base, while he stepped back into the destroyed reality to tackle the tutorial. The outside world now resembled a wasteland, completely wiped out by a nuclear explosion. Because the environment was incredibly dark, his natural perception and terrain sensing skills were simply not enough to navigate safely. Knowing he would be essentially blind during combat, without assistance he quickly retrieved a specific item. From his 3rd dimensional slot, he pulled out a cluster of shade grapes, a special fruit that temporarily boosted a person's night vision. As soon as he ate one, his eyes began to glow with a faint, greenish-yellow light instantly, allowing him to clearly spot the undead creatures wandering in the distance. Now his main priority was finding a secure hiding spot within the ruined city. Unlike the rest of the ruthlessly difficult game, which rarely warned players before dangerous events started, the tutorial phase was quite obvious. The sudden arrival of massive, overwhelming zombie hordes served as the undeniable signal that the brutal test had finally begun to trigger the massive zombie wall. A player usually has to be seen by the undead horde. Since the young man was carefully sneaking past them, he completely avoided this first method. Alternatively, the tutorial could also begin if someone picked up a specific trigger item, focused on exploiting the known glitch. He stared intently at an empty space on the ground until a blue crack magically appeared. By grabbing the weapon at the exact moment it generated, he successfully created a duplicate. To his surprise, the real world version of this cloned item turned out to be the premium ebony wood club from the shop, making it vastly superior to its standard in-game counterpart. Although the game's recent updates were highly confusing, this specific mechanic provided an incredible advantage. After storing his new gear, he noticed the growing noise of the infected outside. As they prepared to attack, he immediately leapt through the window and crushed the closest creature. Realizing that the horde would follow him everywhere anyway, he decided to completely stop hiding. Now that the trial had officially started, he went over the different ways to survive. One method was to fight endlessly and eliminate every single monster in the area. While he was highly skilled at taking them down, players who wanted to avoid a prolonged battle could try to break through the zombie barrier by force. Hoping to finish the trial as quickly as his experienced friends usually did, he charged at the wall and struck a creature directly in the chest. Unfortunately, the attempt failed, forcing him to step back in disappointment. Still, he did not let the setback bother him too much. Relying on his tactical knowledge, he shifted to his primary plan. locating and defeating the boss. Immediately, he began running at full speed toward his target. He generally knew the right direction, because navigating specific checkpoints in the designated area was supposed to force the boss to appear. The real-world environment, however, made it much harder to find the exact path. Furthermore, the night vision from his special fruit was running out, meaning he had to hurry. Remembering that the crucial building was located within a 3-kilometer distance from the starting zone, he carefully dodged the wandering enemies. He steered toward a completely empty sector, and eventually found his destination, slipping inside, just as his enhanced vision faded completely, because the undead crowd could not follow him into this specific location. He finally had a safe place to catch his breath, and wait for the boss to show up. To get a clear view of the upcoming enhanced monster, the young man realized he needed to reach the rooftop. As these thoughts crossed his mind, he was completely caught off guard by the sight of a girl standing on the staircase. It turned out to be Mi-kyung, and she was equally surprised to see him. She quickly explained that everyone in their group had managed to survive, which relieved him, though he was still amazed she had made it this far. According to her, the group had originally tried to follow the survival manual. Unfortunately, the stubborn troll Kyung-hoon had convinced them to stick together against the written advice. Consequently, the undead had overwhelmed their position and chased them all the way to this building. Frustrated by the other man's foolishness, Siang-ho offered the girl some serious guidance while doing his best to maintain his disguise. As an ordinary survivor, he warned her that the area's boss monster was about to appear. Frightened, she assumed he had intentionally come to this dangerous spot to hunt the creature. However, he quickly lied, claiming that the horde had simply chased him there as well. She accepted his excuse without pressing further. He then explained the mechanics of the tutorial, noting that defeating the boss would instantly break the zombie wall, calm the horde's aggression, and scatter the remaining monsters. Referencing a well-known online guide, which he had actually written himself, he added that simply hiding or escaping after the boss's death would successfully conclude the trial. Just as he mentioned the boss's imminent arrival, a strange, electrical surge erupted from one of the creatures in the crowd outside. Seeing the monster sprout tentacles, Mi-kyung expressed her confusion. In response, Young-ho asked if she had felt anything change within herself, explaining that this specific type of enhanced zombie possessed the power to block a person's special abilities. Panicking, she opened her system window and confirmed that her powers were indeed locked. He was experiencing the exact same restriction. Checking if she still had faith in him, he was reassured when she expressed her full trust, grateful for everything he had done for her so far. Fortunately, she had remembered to bring all the essential supplies he had previously recommended. With everything ready, he instructed the girl to stay safe on the roof and make enough noise to distract the regular undead. Meanwhile, he planned to handle the mutated boss himself. Although he appeared perfectly calm on the outside, stepping onto the main battlefield genuinely terrified him. Facing a trade-ceiling monster surrounded by minions was a difficult situation. He kicked himself for this careless mistake, realizing he had forgotten this detail, because early-game monsters never possessed ceiling abilities. In the original version, he deeply regretted not placing his bow in his primary storage slot. To his absolute shock, however, the weapon suddenly materialized in his quick inventory. The moment he thought about it, grabbing the bow, he deduced that his extra abilities were still functioning simply because his own level was higher than the monster's. Relieved that his quick access storage still worked, he pulled out his arrows and shield. He acknowledged that defeating such a low-level boss would likely yield no special item drops or new skills, although the effort required to defeat the boss would result in a significant waste of resources. The young man decided it did not matter. Up on the rooftop, Mi-kyung began yelling and waved a lit flare to successfully draw the undead horde's attention. Her impressive execution of the distraction plan genuinely surprised him. Taking advantage of the opening, he pulled back his bowstring. Because his stats had recently increased by 1 point, the physical strain of the weapon was no longer an issue. After silently appreciating the opportunity, he fired the arrow at a terrifying speed. The projectile pierced the monster's body, causing it to shriek in pain. Since the initial shot was not enough to finish the job, he leapt into the fray to handle his very first boss battle personally. He forcefully slammed his shield into the beast, pinning it against the ground so it could not escape. With the monster trapped, he struck its head with his weapon and secured the kill. Following the creature's death, the system lifted the ability restrictions and awarded him 10 points. Just as he had suspected, the victory did not grant him any new skills, so he quickly searched the area for dropped loot. he managed to find two bracelets called Rambutan, which were accessories designed to enhance a person's perception. Mika-yun soon ran over to him, after safely escaping the remaining zombies, using her restored abilities. Seeing the two bracelets made him realize that these items were actually distributed to all participants for surviving the tutorial, rather than being exclusive boss rewards. In addition, he noticed a bonus of 17 points, which he attributed to a recent system patch. When he handed one of the bracelets to the girl, she initially refused, feeling her contribution was too small to deserve a reward. However, he insisted she take it gently, fastening the item around her wrist. He assured her that her help was the primary reason they had succeeded. Smiling warmly, he suggested they head over to the fitness club next. She pointed out that a nearby building was visibly leaning. He remembered from previous videos that at least 5 floors of the structure were still stable, but they could not afford to waste time, since it could collapse without warning. She agreed, planning to notify the building's owner later on. He intended to explain the rules of the murderer system once their entire group was together. Suddenly Hyungjun, their athletic friend, called out to them. They were both relieved and happy to see that the man had not been infected. Hyungjun quickly suggested they move the conversation indoors, mentioning he had a substantial amount of information to discuss. Once the whole team had gathered inside, the protagonist casually announced that they had managed to kill a boss monster. The rest of the group was completely shocked by the news, especially when he highlighted how crucial Mick Young's distraction had been to their overall victory. Despite having some assistance, the rest of the team greatly admired the young man for facing the boss monster directly. Curiously, Hyungjun and the others had not received any special rewards for clearing the tutorial, aside from their basic starting weapons. The athletic man also noted that they had not come across any checkpoints during their escape. Their path had simply been completely overrun by the undead. This inconsistency confused the protagonist. He theorized that the system might adjust the tutorial's difficulty based on a player's individual level, meaning everyone had to fulfill unique conditions to earn specific prizes. When he asked if anyone had gained points through means other than fighting, Hyungjun explained that he had actually earned points by rescuing Yuhayan from a zombie attack. This confirmed to the protagonist that non-violent actions such as assisting allies or successfully fleeing a horde were also viable ways to accumulate points. Hearing this, Mick Young pointed out that players could now survive much easier by relying on non-combat skills. Shifting the conversation, the gym enthusiast finally addressed the main topic on everyone's mind by asking about the protagonist's special ability. Since the entire group had officially awakened and received a trade after finishing the tutorial, the young man realized his own initial power had been an exclusive early bonus. The growing differences between the original video game and their current reality were beginning to overwhelm him because the world's mechanics were shifting so unpredictably. He recognized that he could no longer depend solely on his past gaming knowledge. While he silently wondered why Mick Young had received an item just like he had, the group began sharing their new powers. Unsurprisingly, the muscular Hyungjun had gained a physical enhancement trait. Due to his background in crafting, Yuyeon acquired the unique ability to navigate and sense his surroundings through dolls. Lastly, Miki revealed that her power allowed her to teleport short distances. With everyone else's secrets out in the open, the protagonist found himself backed into a corner. He was deeply reluctant to expose his ultimate advantage, although telling the truth would prevent him from having to maintain a lie. He preferred to save his real abilities for the original friends he trusted with his life, as they would know how to adapt properly. While he was lost in thought, Mick Young tried to fill the awkward silence by chatting with Hyungjun. Making a bold decision, the young man chose to lie once more, claiming his power was attack prediction. Yuhayan expressed immediate excitement, assuming this meant their friend could never fall victim to an ambush. However, the protagonist quickly downplayed the skill, explaining that it merely allowed him to see brief after images of an enemy's incoming strikes. Smoothly changing the subject, he asked the group about their future plans. Hyungjun stated that he wanted to consult with Bora and their other companion first, but his primary objective was to survive while steadily leveling up. To achieve this, they intended to rely on the information the young man had provided before the disaster, which included details on finding facilities to unlock the system shop. Hyungjun planned to focus on their primary objective before tracking down and punishing the men who had harassed Mick Young. Watching his friend step up gave Seong-ho a sense of relief, proving that sharing his gaming knowledge had been a worthwhile decision. The mood briefly shifted when Yuhayan suddenly asked about Si Young-ho's current level. The young student reasoned that anyone capable of defeating a tutorial boss entirely alone must have been actively hunting zombies since the very beginning, before he could voice any more of his sharp deductions. However, Hyungjun grabbed him in a playful but overly tight chokehold. Seeing this, Shang-ho quickly realized that both Mikyung and the athletic man were deliberately protecting his secrets. They were trying so hard to cover for him that the muscular man accidentally choked the poor kid until he passed out. Once their meeting wrapped up, the protagonist prepared to depart on his solo journey. Before he could leave, his muscular friend stopped him to hand over some snacks and a pair of binoculars recently crafted by Yu Hain. Handing over the useful gear, Hyungjun expressed his gratitude for all the help they had received so far. Surprisingly, he then brought up the topic of his past divorce. He confessed the deeply embarrassing truth that he had separated from his wife simply because he refused to sacrifice his physique, going as far as faking meals with her just to stay lean. By sharing such a ridiculous personal failing, he gently encouraged Si Young-ho not to be afraid of opening up about his own hidden truths. It became obvious to the young man that his friends fully understood he was lying to them. Just as Hyungjun turned away, Si Young-ho grabbed his arm. He made a sincere promise that, once the group leveled up and gained more experience, he would eventually return to survive alongside them. With that final assurance, he walked away. Sometime later, Si Young-ho found himself shoveling a heavy layer of snow. The weather had turned freezing, which was completely bizarre, given that it was supposed to be a warm season. Although the drastic climate changes annoyed him deeply, he felt thankful that he had safely locked all his essential supplies inside his bunker beforehand. Ultimately, the harsh weather actually worked in his favor. The freezing temperatures had formed sharp ice shards around his camp, unintentionally creating a sturdy defensive barrier that would keep wandering goblins away. For the time being, initially, he had planned to dig a protective moat around his base. However, the extreme cold had frozen the soil completely solid, making any excavation efforts impossible. At this point, the young man needed to evaluate his current situation and adjust his future strategies. Looking back at the core mechanics of survival life, the experience was purely focused on staying alive. Participants were limited to equipping 5 items simultaneously and could only retain a maximum of 10 skills in a designated slot. The major drawback was that acquiring a new ability beyond this limit automatically erased the oldest one. To thrive in that digital environment, players had to embrace a ruthless lifestyle and establish themselves as apex predators. However, navigating the real world presented unexpected inconsistencies, such as Mikyung's sudden arrival and Hyungjun's failure to encounter any tutorial checkpoints. Because of these differences, Si Young-ho suspected a secret game patch had been applied. During a week he was offline, leaving him to face the apocalypse without complete information. Despite these uncertainties, his fundamental objective remained unchanged. Gathering essential supplies and acquiring powerful skills were still his top priorities for survival moving forward. He simply needed to rely on his existing expertise. He carefully outlined his immediate tasks. Inside the alternate dimensions forest, he planned to construct a protective moat and clear out the local owlbears to secure the valley. Meanwhile, in the real world, his agenda included gathering resources at the festival's firework areas and keeping a close watch on the survivors at the villa party. When he tried to establish long-term plans, the sheer volume of work overwhelmed him. Opting for a more adaptable approach, rather than strict scheduling, he decided his first move would be visiting Gwangali at midnight to collect fireworks. To keep things simple, he immediately began prepping his weapons for the mission elsewhere. A tense scene unfolded as a leader and his girlfriend berated a subordinate for his inability to open a simple tin can, just as the aggressive boss prepared to strike his underling for talking back. The woman intervened, sweetly suggesting they share a drink instead. However, the leader's mind was consumed by paranoia. He was terrified by the possibility that Si Young-ho had somehow survived the outbreak and awakened special abilities. Driven by this fear, he declared his primary intention to eliminate the young man as quickly as possible. Unbeknownst to the hostile group, their intended target was hiding nearby, calmly listening to every word. Hearing the man's extreme fixation, which seemed even stronger than his ex-girlfriend's, Si Young-ho briefly considered setting the entire building on fire. He concluded that showing any mercy would be a fatal mistake, regardless of the personal risks involved. Stepping out of the shadows, Si Young-ho deliberately revealed his presence. The panicked thugs instantly pointed their weapons at him, with the leader demanding to know why he was wandering around so late maintaining his composure. The young man explained that the darkness actually offered safety due to the zombies. Reduced activity provided. Survivors steered clear of the dangerous creepers that emerged around dawn. One of the subordinates laughed at this advice, dismissing Xiang Ho as an amateur. The thug arrogantly claimed that creepers only targeted players who had reached level 7 or above. Since their group was only at level 5, they believed they were perfectly safe. Acknowledging the man's confidence, Xiang Ho calmly informed him that the intelligence they had received from someone named In Hawk was completely false. While the henchman struggled to process this revelation, the protagonist casually announced a change in his nightly itinerary. Instead of scavenging for fireworks, he revealed that his new objective was to completely raid their hideout. Enraged and assuming Xiang Ho had lost his mind, the leader immediately commanded his crew to attack. Without warning, a terrifying noise from the left paralyzes the group with fear. A deadly keeper-class monster has started hunting them. Using himself as bait, Xiang Ho sprints away, prompting his enemies to chase him aggressively. One of the men, relying on a speed-enhancing ability, rushes forward with absolute confidence. However, his sprint abruptly ends when he crashes face first into Xiang Ho's invisible portal, shattering his nose and collapsing to the ground. While the rest of the group blindly continues their pursuit, the monstrous keeper catches up to the fallen man and slaughters him instantly. Panicking, the surviving pair decide to run in opposite directions. Unfortunately for the woman, she accidentally bumps into a creeper monster. Just as it reaches its detonation point, the resulting explosion instantly blows her to pieces. The force of the blast knocks the arrogant leader to his knees, completely disoriented and unaware of how his plan failed so miserably. He desperately tries to crawl to safety. Just as the keeper prepares to consume him, the man gathers the last of his strength to strike the monster's head with his weapon. The desperate blow barely even moves the creature's neck, dealing absolutely no damage. Realizing the fight is completely hopeless, the defeated thug accepts his grim fate as the nightmare beast opens its massive jaws and bites his head off. Taking advantage of the distraction, Xiang Ho positions himself safely within his portal and aims his rifle. He fires a shot directly into the monster's back, but the creature only stumbles. This reaction confirms his suspicion that the ongoing plague has already started, weakening the impact of his bullets. Nevertheless, he continues to unload his weapon, firing shot after shot, until the beast finally collapses and dies. By eliminating both the monster and his human enemies, the young man advances to level 12. He earns 20 points and successfully unlocks the terrain detection skill. Once again, although he used indirect methods to eliminate his human targets, this time he fully accepts that his deadly intentions carry the same heavy moral weight as a direct murder. Showing no sympathy, he simply labels his fallen enemy as garbage, packs up the man's belongings, and walks away. The rest of his scavenging mission proceeds without any further issues. Later, he breaks into the dead man's hideout. To his surprise, he discovers a large stash of valuable goods that can be sold at the auction house in the future. He justifies the theft by reasoning that the previous owner would have eventually died from natural causes anyway, even without his interference. Continuing his journey near Guangli, Xiang Ho successfully gathers the fireworks needed for the upcoming festival. With the assistance of his loyal dog, he carefully sneaks past the more dangerous monsters in the area along the way. He effortlessly takes out several sleeping zombies, accumulating more points and accelerating his progression. By the end of the night, his impressive efforts boost him all the way to level 14. Despite his excellent progress, a new problem emerges as he finishes his work around 7 in the morning. While clearing out the remaining supplies from the hideout, he realizes that manually transporting heavy goods between locations is incredibly exhausting. Furthermore, since a heavy snowstorm is currently raging in his alternate dimension, he cannot simply toss his gathered loot into the portal for temporary storage. Storing his sensitive supplies proved highly dangerous, as a single accidental spark could completely blow up the entire shelter. Since keeping things underground presented its own set of complications, leaving the items in their current location remained the most logical choice. With his logistics settled, the young man's next objective was to visit the villa district to ensure Suyan was safe. He figured he could also use that time to investigate Kaon Chun's safe house. However, the faint sound of falling rain suddenly caught his attention. Peeking outside to see what was happening, he was surprised to witness a massive typhoon rolling in. This severe storm ended up ravaging the real world for 2 entire days. Taking advantage of the lockdown, he retreated to the alternate dimension to finish digging his defensive trench. Working in the freezing environment quickly taught him that exerting too much physical energy in the cold could be life-threatening. By the time he finally completed the mode a day later, he was entirely drained and refused to do any more heavy labor. Fortunately, the harsh weather soon began to warm up. As the temperature returned to a comfortable, normal level, the surrounding ice barriers melted away completely. After recovering from the bitter cold, he checked on the real world again, only to see literal tornadoes tearing the city apart. Because this extreme weather trapped all the other awakened survivors indoors, he gained valuable free time to focus on the next phase of his strategy. Returning to the alternate world, he ventured deep into the forest. In the original video game, firearms were considered an absolute cheat code. They were only introduced during the late stages and unlocked after the metal destroying plague had passed. Navigating the dense woods was remarkably easy. Thanks to his loyal dog's sharp senses, Dingo suddenly reacted to something on the right, leading them straight to a massive owlbear, resting by a lake. In addition to his pet's guidance, the young man's recently upgraded perception and terrain detection skills gave him a massive advantage. In scanning his surroundings, the vicious beast was busy, aggressively slapping the water to catch and eat fish, completely unaware that it was being watched. Holding a rifle with exactly 15 rounds remaining, he prepared for his most ambitious battle yet. Because this creature was significantly stronger than a Keeper-class monster, it would require a minimum of 7 precise hits to bring it down. Even with the unweakened bullets of this dimension, knowing he had no way to resupply his ammunition at the moment, every single shot had to be perfectly calculated. Squeezing the trigger, he landed the first bullet directly in the beast's neck, instantly enraging the powerful monster. Searching the trees with a deadly glare, the massive beast found nothing but empty branches. The young man had already relocated to a second hiding spot from his new position. He fired 2 precise shots that struck the creature's left shoulder and right leg. Screaming in agony, the crippled predator finally locked eyes with its attacker. Without saying a single word, the hunter challenged the beast to make its move, prompting the enraged monster to charge forward, like a wild bull relying on his quick access inventory. He instantly summoned the tools he needed. He ignited a firework and tossed it directly at the approaching threat, while simultaneously equipping his shield. Just as the monster raised its claws to strike, the explosive detonated inches from its face. The blinding flash of light completely robbed the beast of its vision. Executing his reliable strategy for handling advanced enemies, he pulled a sharp weapon from his 4th slot. Stepping forward, he delivered a fatal, agonizing stab that officially ended the creature's dominance over the valley. This impressive victory granted him 25 points, pushing his rank straight to level 15. Along with extra storage slots, he unlocked a new ability that allowed for silent movement. Exhausted from the intense battle, he took a moment to review his system upgrades. Although he felt the overall rewards barely justified the extreme effort, he knew the monster's claws would serve as highly valuable crafting materials. To maximize his resource gathering, he pulled a chainsaw from his 5th storage cube and carefully dismantled the creature's remains. Following the exhausting work, both hunter and pet enjoyed a well-deserved meal of premium meat. After Dingo eagerly swallowed 5 pieces, the young man tossed him an extra fish to satisfy his remaining hunger. Observing that the puppy had visibly grown in size, he hoped his furry companion would mature quickly, enough to assist in future combat situations. With their hunger satisfied, they prepared to move on. The protagonist then turned his attention to the newly unlocked auction house feature. The system was straightforward, allowing users to list or retrieve goods, but it now charged a steep 10% transaction fee. This felt like a massive ripoff compared to the original game's 5% rate. While browsing the available listings, he made a startling discovery. Another user had already posted an item, proving that someone else had managed to reach level 15 before him. He quickly calmed himself down by rationalizing the situation. Since his own portal ability was purely for utility, it made perfect sense that survivors, blessed with combat-oriented powers, would level up much faster. Curious about the seller's identity, he checked the item's comment section. The owner was casually complaining about leveling up too quickly while fighting powerful keepers. Recognizing the distinct typing habits, the young man formed a solid guess about who this mysterious top player might be, all while reflecting on how crucial it was to maintain a hidden identity in this dangerous new reality. In the original game, players constantly disguised their true identities. For example, some men would use voice changers and female avatars to pretend to be attractive girls, online unless someone spoke in the global chat, the only place where user IDs were visible. They could keep their real identity hidden forever. Furthermore, experienced veterans rarely played the game the way the developers intended. Noticing the letters XS at the end of the seller's auction comment, Shanghu immediately realized this person was a massive attention seeker, deciding to keep his approach simple. The young man sent a brief voice message to say hello. The stranger quickly demanded to know who was messaging him, amazed that the person's aggressive attitude matched his old in-game persona perfectly. Shanghu revealed his classic screen name, Gimba Plover. He waited anxiously for a reply, assuming the other player might doubt his claim. Instead of showing suspicion, the stranger burst into laughter, before passionately scolding Shanghu for taking so long to reach out. The player had assumed that Shanghu was secretly working with the president to save the nation by distributing those warning flyers. Correcting this misunderstanding, the protagonist clarified that he had only passed along some information to the authorities. This revelation made Shanghu certain that another knowledgeable veteran had to be working directly inside the government. Surprisingly, this mysterious player was actually an incredibly muscular man, in real life, making his username Rabbit Princess. Highly ironic, even though sharing details about one's special abilities was practically a death sentence. In this new reality, the muscular man openly offered to explain his power. He felt completely comfortable doing so, because he assumed they would be teaming up soon. His trait was called Resurrection, an overpowered ability he could use repeatedly, just by spending his accumulated points. This explained how he had managed to skyrocket to level 17, while acquiring various physical, elemental and special resistances along the way. Naturally, the old friend asked Xiangho about his own trait, in return to the large man's shock. The protagonist completely refused to answer. Yang explained that he suffered from severe trust issues, and had not even shared his secret with his closest companions. He reassured his gaming buddy that he did value their bond, but insisted on discussing such sensitive topics face to face rather than getting offended. Rabbit Princess completely understood his caution. As a sign of goodwill, the muscular man instructed Shangho to check the auction house one more time. Upon opening the digital interface, the young man was amazed to see a rare, magical metal ring listed for sale. Rabbit Princess had scoured an entire city block during the tutorial phase just to find this specific artifact. Now he was offering it to Xiangho for a mere 10 points. Stunned by the gesture, the protagonist realized his friend was basically giving away a highly valuable item for free just to prove his loyalty and express his gratitude for Shangho. Revealing his identity, these two players had actually met during the early stages of the original game, teaming up for numerous missions. Although they had formed a tight bond as veterans, the protagonist was still surprised by his friend's incredible generosity. Feeling deeply grateful for the magical ring, he decided to demonstrate his own sincerity in return. To do this, he listed some smoked trout and an owlbear claw in the auction house. When Rabbit Princess saw the delicious cooked fish, his mouth watered and he eagerly accepted the trade. The muscular man expressed his shock that monsters were already spawning in the world. In response, Shangho hinted that his unique ability was the reason he was running into these creatures, offering this small secret as a personal gesture of trust. Discussing their eventual meetup, the young man established a few strict ground rules. He insisted that his friend absolutely had to wear clothes in the real world, and demanded he stop using his annoying XS catchphrase, warning that such behavior would attract dangerous attention. Taking the feedback lightly, the eccentric player agreed to switch his signature phrase to Gia's, instead promising to save his naked strolls only for when he was completely alone. Realizing the man still fully intended to wander the streets without clothes in his free time, left Jongho feeling completely exasperated. Meanwhile, on his side of the city, Rabbit Princess, whose real name was Ziqian, ended the conversation and happily devoured his first decent meal in ages. Just then the massive typhoon finally cleared up, allowing bright sunshine to break through the clouds. Taking the beautiful weather as a divine blessing, the beefy man jokingly wondered if his gaming buddy had somehow turned into a god. Bursting with excitement over their upcoming reunion, and feeling a sudden warmth in his heart, Xiaoqian leapt dramatically out of his window. He landed forcefully on a wandering zombie, crushing its face into the pavement. After casually tossing the creature's body aside, like a toy, he suddenly encountered a major problem. Despite possessing incredibly powerful combat skills, Ziqian had a famously terrible sense of direction. He quickly realized He had completely lost track of his own safe house, much like a notoriously lost swordsman from a popular pirate anime. 3 days after the storm ended, the survivors at the gym were steadily adjusting to the apocalyptic environment. Having advanced to level 5, Yuan was now capable of controlling his dolls over much greater distances. He managed to deliver a folded paper airplane letter to Xiang-ho, informing him that the group planned to relocate to a taekwondo studio near the protagonist's home. The message also included some surprising personal updates, noting that Kyung Hoon and Bora had officially started dating. Furthermore, through sheer determination, Kyung Jun had successfully reached level 10 and gained access to the system store. Whenever these paper messages arrived, the young man would reply with valuable guidance, directing his former companions towards safe zones and supply caches. He had secretly prepared for them beforehand, hoping the shared intelligence would make gathering resources easier for his friends. The young man sent the paper airplane back afterward. He accessed the digital auction house to check on Zikian. His muscular friend had been slow to respond recently, likely because he was busy fighting hordes of zombies on his long journey toward Bizen. Just like in the original video game, progressing past level 15 in reality required double the amount of experience points. Players commonly referred to this brutal grinding phase as the Hell Zone. By checking his status window, the protagonist calculated the specific ratio between points and his current rank. He estimated that reaching level 16 would require eliminating roughly 100 undead creatures. While he could certainly achieve this milestone by focusing strictly on combat, he had other exciting tasks that demanded his immediate attention. A couple of hours later, inside his safe house, he received an extraordinary gift from his tiny insect companions, a knife crafted entirely from mithril. The beetles proudly presented the weapon alongside the rare, or they had previously agreed to trade, claiming they had forged the blade themselves. Skeptical, he bluntly told the bugs that such advanced craftsmanship was impossible for mere insects. When his harsh words visibly angered the adorable creatures, he decided to test their abilities by handing them an ordinary metal coin. Following his instructions to create something out of it, one of the baby beetles grabbed the coin and rapidly chewed on the metal. In a matter of seconds, the bug fashioned a perfect miniature replica of the knife. The young man was absolutely astonished by their genuine skill. However, he quickly noticed an inconsistency. While the tiny coin knife was incredibly sharp, the larger mithril blade lacked that same refined edge. When he carelessly criticized the larger weapon's unfinished craftsmanship, the sensitive insects broke down in tears. Seeing their distress, he offered them a chance to explain themselves, using a whiteboard, feeling it was only fair, since they had a formal contract. Grabbing different markers, the insects quickly drew a picture of a goblin violently attacking them. They successfully communicated that this ambush had interrupted their work, preventing them from polishing the weapon properly. When he asked them to point out the exact location of the attack on a map, the beetle leader indicated that the goblins were gathered near their nest. Armed with this knowledge, the young man promised to completely eliminate the green monsters during his next hunting trip. In exchange for his protection, he insisted that the beetles finish refining the mithril weapon. Having settled the new terms, he felt so appreciative of their generosity that he even promised to burn the goblin corpses to ensure the area was safe. He then presented them with an additional crafting project, completely separate from the extermination deal. The bugs eagerly agreed to the new task, thrilled by their highly productive and friendly partnership. The protagonist happily shook their tiny claws. The protagonist realized the immense future value of his tiny beetle companions, while out gathering resources with his loyal dog. As the days passed, the infected creatures had grown significantly tougher compared to their initial forms. Spotting a target, he did not hesitate to engage. With a single devastating downward strike, he crushed the monster's skull into a bloody pulp. Briefly noticing that his club was beginning to show signs of heavy wear, almost immediately, a group of the undead swarmed his position. Unleashing his full strength, he swiftly took down two enemies simultaneously. When a third creature tried to ambush him from behind, he reacted instantly, spinning around and delivering a massive blow, as if he were swinging a baseball bat. At this point, slaughtering infected creatures felt like a meaningless, everyday hobby to him. His primary destination for this trip was the luxurious Eden Villa. Although the upscale complex had lost some of its shine, it still offered a much better environment than the hellish conditions of the ruined city. The young man noted that before the disaster, he would never have had the money to step foot in such an expensive place. He wondered if Suyuan had managed to survive, as he had not heard from her recently. However, He knew that they're completely ordinary friends. Kyungjun and Bora were doing fine furthermore. It was now a proven fact that individuals with awakened powers could not pass the deadly zombie spores to normal people. Truthfully, the protagonist was not deeply invested in Suyan's survival. His interest was purely strategic. The villa's geographic position was incredibly valuable because it sat right next to his ultimate goal, Kyungchun's personal bunker, as well as a secure time shelter built by the government. Because the building's elevator was out of order, he instructed his puppy to climb onto his back. He then began ascending the empty shaft, using a dangling rope. Upon reaching the top floor, he realized that an average person would have found that climb nearly impossible. The deliberate setup of the rope strongly suggested that Suyan had installed it to secure her living space. After navigating the hallway, he arrived at her apartment and knocked from the other side. An angry voice shouted, assuming he was a different unwanted visitor. Looking through the peephole, Suyan desperately warned the person outside to leave immediately, because there was an active murderer roaming the area. Her panic quickly turned into pure shock when she realized who was actually standing in the hallway. The young man casually greeted her, explaining that he had dropped by simply to collect the money she owed him from their previous medicine trade. While it was technically a valid debt, demanding payment during the end of the world seemed absolutely insane. Even so, Suyan found his bizarre attitude oddly charming. She quickly invited him inside so she could explain the dangerous situation regarding the local killer and answer any questions he had. Once they took a seat on the sofa, the young woman immediately began sharing a massive amount of shocking news. She spoke so rapidly that he actually struggled to keep up with her explanation. Boiling down her story, the local time shelter acted as the central hub, surrounded by 3 different survivor groups. A 10-person squad known as Party C had recently proposed opening this shelter early to distribute its resources. However, when the other 2 factions rejected this idea, a killer suddenly emerged and stabbed someone. Judging by the large size of Party C, the young man secretly deduced that Kyungjin was likely behind the attack, possibly using one of his own followers as the assassin. He theorized that Kyungjin possessed a mind control power that only worked under specific conditions, such as requiring a formal proposal to be made first. Wanting to protect Seong from this dangerous conflict, Seong-ho pretended to be completely clueless. The most suspicious part of her story was the timing of the murder, which happened right after the other groups declined Party C's offer. Furthermore, while Suyan's group and Party B suffered casualties from the attacker, Party C remained entirely untouched. Although he could not figure out why Party C wanted to open the shelter so prematurely, he did discover that Suyan had awakened a healing ability. Even though it only cured minor wounds, it was still a highly valuable skill, since she played a support role. Fighting monsters directly to gain experience was incredibly difficult for her. This discussion about support classes led them to a new conclusion. Regarding Party C's leader, they realized he probably had a non-combat ability as well, meaning he desperately needed external materials to level up. Seong agreed with this theory, pointing out that the leader's personal power did not match the overall strength of his followers. Seong-ho added that the leader might be facing severe pressure from his group's internal issues, forcing him to resort to extreme measures. With their theories perfectly aligned, he then asked why she was isolated from her own squad. Instead of gathering supplies, she explained that her original plan to go scavenging was interrupted because a teammate wanted to confess romantic feelings to her. Extremely frustrated, she complained that her group was full of foolish people driven solely by their own lust. This annoying environment perfectly explained why she had been so furious when he first knocked on her door. Although the young man was completely unprepared for such an unusual situation, Suyan defended her teammates by explaining that they were not inherently bad people. She then asked about his future plans. Upon hearing that he intended to secretly observe the time shelter, she expressed deep concern for his safety. He quickly calmed her fears, reassuring her that it would strictly be a scouting mission. Furthermore, he pointed out that the constant waves of infected creatures would prevent the enemy team from gathering near the shelter in large numbers, keeping the area relatively safe. Right before departing, he handed her a glowing golden stone to use instead of a regular candle. He mentioned that he had acquired the useful item from the system shop, leaving her amazed at how far he had progressed. Parting ways, he promised to repay his previous debt to her, along with interest, once his current mission was successfully completed. Meanwhile, the leader of Party C, Ki Young-jun, stood near the time shelter, discussing his faction's upcoming purification plans. His subordinates reported that their designated killer had successfully assassinated another member of Party B. Because the survivors were constantly moving their supplies around, the group felt confident that Party B's territory would soon be entirely wiped out. On the other hand, Party A remained suspiciously inactive. To provoke them into making a move, Kyungjun commanded his men to murder one of their members as well. Although Party A had been expertly hiding recently, the scouts had managed to track Sian as she headed toward Eden Plaza, choosing her as their next victim. The cruel leader activated his special ability to officially order her assassination. The conversation then shifted to another mysterious individual they had been trying to locate. When his assistant bowed in apology for failing to identify the target, Kyungjun grew incredibly frustrated. He was absolutely certain the man was hiding somewhere in Bizen, but lacked an exact location. Finding this stranger quickly was critical, because the leader's unique trait suffered from a severe flaw. He was no longer receiving system points when his controlled followers secured kills. He deeply feared that, if he did not resolve this issue soon, the mysterious player known as Unknown, the same person who possessed paralysis poison, even before the world ended, would completely destroy him. Additionally, Kyungjun was desperate to reach level 15 before a scheduled auction summit, to ensure the other regional bosses would respect his authority. His anxious thoughts were suddenly interrupted when his lackeys brought in a trapped horde of zombies. Praising their efforts, he threw a Molotov cocktail directly under the creatures, burning the entire group to ashes. This execution earned him 40 points and pushed his rank to level 9, leaving him with 6 more levels to conquer. To achieve his grand ambitions, the leader immediately issued 3 final orders to his team. They were instructed to figure out how to unlock the time shelters mechanism, gather more infected monsters for his personal leveling, and above all else, hunt down the player known as Unknown. From the safety of his portal, the young man happily observed the frustrated enemy leader shouting orders. He secretly hoped that his opponent would not act too hastily. After all, with Sian's assistance, the very person actively searching for him was about to become the prey. Meanwhile, events unfolded exactly as the young woman had predicted. One of her teammates suddenly dropped to one knee to declare his romantic feelings. She found his behavior incredibly frustrating, considering that a dangerous murderer was currently roaming the area relying on his clairvoyance ability. The foolish man insisted they were perfectly safe. She sharply criticized his carelessness, reminding him that another group member had recently been killed during a supply mission. Although he argued that the assassin was supposedly busy in a different territory, she was exhausted by his constant assumptions. Without any proof, after he desperately pleaded to be her boyfriend, she rejected him completely and turned to walk away. Just then, the teammate suddenly grabbed his chest in pain. Recognizing this specific ache as a clear warning sign, the young woman realized the killer was approaching, and that her companion's powers had failed them once again. Knowing the assassin likely possessed tracking skills, she urged them to escape the plaza before a deadly barrier could be activated. The man attempted to use his powers to locate the threat, but the knife-wielding enemy was already walking right toward them. Even while blaming her useless teammate for bringing bad luck, she managed to notice a crucial detail. The attacker was wearing the exact same uniform used by Party C. Without wasting time, the murderer triggered a death field, locking them inside a forced combat zone. Because neither of the survivors had fighting abilities, their only option was to hide from the combat-oriented assassin. She quickly scolded her companion for forgetting the basic rule that killers were temporarily unable to run at the very start of a death match. Putting her survival plan into action, she instructed him to prepare a special flashlight that was immune to the metal-destroying plague. While preparing to defend herself, she silently hoped that her trusted ally would arrive in time to rescue them. Suddenly, the attacker lunged forward to slice her throat. Moving quickly, she dodged the initial strike and shined the bright flashlight directly into his eyes. However, instead of using the enemy's temporary blindness to run away, she paused to celebrate her successful counterattack. This brief hesitation cost her dearly. The killer recovered and delivered a brutal punch that sent her crashing backward. Spitting up blood, she realized her foolish mistake as the murderer closed in to finish the job, leaving her desperately begging her cowardly teammate for assistance. Watching the man, who had just begged to be her boyfriend, flee in absolute terror, only validated the young woman's decision to reject him. Assuming her life was over, she shut her eyes as the assassin prepared a lethal strike. However, a familiar voice suddenly broke the tension. Questioning why she was giving up, the protagonist had arrived just in time, instantly knocking the weapon away before delivering a massive kick to the attacker's stomach, returning the exact same brutal treatment the killer had inflicted on her. Reaching out to help her up, he firmly reminded her that dying was simply not an option today. A short while later, he gave her time to treat her injuries, which were steadily improving, thanks to her natural recovery skills. During this brief rest, he verified that the leader of Party C possessed a psychic ability capable of brainwashing people, perfectly explaining his followers' blind loyalty. When she tried to process the news that her cowardly teammate had already been killed after serving his bait, he quickly advised her to stop worrying about things she could not change. Their primary obstacle now was the assassin's incredible toughness and rapid healing, which made Suyen doubt they could actually survive. The young man explained that these forced combat zones usually required defeating the killer, and even if the energy barrier fell, hordes of infected creatures would immediately swarm the area to block all exits. Nevertheless, he revealed that he had brought her to this specific location to exploit a system glitch involving the nearby sky bridge. He noted that as the murderer grew more excited, a state signaled by glowing red eyes, the combat arena would shrink, eventually causing a momentary opening in the invisible wall. He instructed her to wait for his signal and escape through that exact gap, although she expressed deep concern about him staying behind to fight such a durable enemy alone. He stated that eliminating the threat was absolutely necessary because the system granted these murderers unique powers to maintain their advantage. He refused to let this one slip away. After ensuring she was safely positioned on the third floor, he waited on the ground level to trigger the glitch. Soon a rapidly pounding heartbeat warned him that his opponent was approaching. Despite feeling ready for the confrontation, the young man was surprised to find the area completely empty. Without warning, a devastating strike came from an unexpected angle, which he barely managed to block with his shield. The assassin had been gifted the rare power to pass through solid walls, making it impossible to hide, and setting the stage for a highly dangerous final battle. The confrontation began, with the assassin bringing his blade down forcefully, evading the strike with a quick step to the side. Chiego immediately ducked under a heavy follow-up kick, keeping his eyes firmly locked on the threat. The young man raised his shield and countered by driving a solid punch right into his opponent's face. Although the blow sent the attacker stumbling backward, with smoke trailing from his mouth, the man remained completely silent. Without showing any natural signs of pain, the killer simply snapped his head back into place and stared coldly at the protagonist, drawing on his past gaming knowledge. Shi Yang knew that such minor damage would not stop his opponent. As the man advanced again, the protagonist easily deflected another heavy knife swing with his shield. Observing the enemy's highly predictable and robotic movements, he concluded that the attacker was definitely acting under mind control. The real danger, however, was a specific mechanic. The assassin would continuously grow stronger until his internal excitement reached its absolute limit. For a brief moment, the young man debated simply ending the fight. Right there, he quickly dismissed the idea, realizing that strictly following his original plan was the best way to secure an indirect victory against Quan Kyung-jun. Backing away to create some space, Xiango watched as a menacing red aura enveloped his enemy. He recognized this as the sign that the second stage of excitement was rapidly approaching. Without warning, the assassin vanished from sight, instantly charging forward with astonishing speed. Caught off guard by this sudden agility boost, the protagonist took a heavy blow that sent him flying backward. Realizing he needed to stall until this temporary power-up wore off, he activated his first inventory slot. As he rushed forward with his shield raised, a blue object materialized between them, unleashing a blinding explosion of light. Choosing to buy some valuable time, Xiang sprinted up a nearby spiral staircase from the floor above. Cien called out to warn him that the combat barrier was actively shrinking and that infected creatures were gathering to form walls. Outside, he firmly instructed her to hold her position, keep an eye on the exterior, and wait for his exact signal to move. After assuring her that he would intercept and stall the murderer on the second floor, she agreed to the strategy. Taking his defensive position, the young man carefully monitored the approaching figure bathed in the glowing red aura. Noticing that the enemy's dark aura had completely vanished, Chanko realized the assassin's excitement was finally reaching its absolute limit. Gripping his weapon tightly, the young man braced himself for the next strike, telling himself he only needed to hold out for a few seconds longer. The murderer lunged forward with terrifying intensity, bringing his blade down in a heavy blow that the protagonist barely deflected with his shield. The massive impact sent a shockwave of energy through the air, landing firmly on his feet. Xianggo gritted his teeth and patiently waited for his window of opportunity. Suddenly a glowing, rapidly beating red heart materialized. As the killer grabbed his own head in apparent agony, a massive wave of energy exploded outward, signaling that the third stage of excitement had officially begun. Recognizing the crucial cue, Xian immediately yelled for Xian to make her move. Taking a deep breath, the young woman sprinted up the stairs, toward the glowing, red barrier that enclosed the combat zone. A crowd of infected creatures stood below, aggressively reaching out for her. Moving with impressive agility, she leapt through the air, narrowly dodging the growling zombies and their grasping hands, until she safely landed outside the arena. Relieved to have actually survived the deadly trap, she glanced back at the shrinking red grid, fearing for her companion's life. If he delayed any longer, she called out to inform him that the undead were completely blocking the entrance, and begged him to escape quickly. Sienna confirmed that he heard her, and immediately dashed forward. As he ran, the floor beneath him suddenly shattered. Debris flew everywhere, as the killer's hand violently burst upward from the ground, shielding himself from the unexpected blast. The protagonist was shocked to realize that his opponent's phasing ability also allowed him to travel vertically through solid ceilings. Hoping to bring the struggle to an end, Xianko calmly suggested to the assassin that they should stop fighting. Hidden within a thick cloud of smoke, the young man was targeted by the killer's red vision. The murderer charged with a wicked grin and slashed at the silhouette, only to realize he had attacked empty air. As the confused assassin frantically searched his surroundings, Xiango's voice echoed from the shadows, confidently stating that he would never be found. Aiming his firearm at the disoriented enemy, from a safe distance, the protagonist casually advised the killer to just surrender and stay on the ground, so he would not have to waste any bullets. Keeping his weapon aimed at the attacker, the young man proposed a simple deal. He suggested that, if the killer simply went to sleep for a few minutes, he would avoid any further injury and wake up to a completely changed reality. Meanwhile, outside the combat zone, a massive crowd of infected creatures struggled and reached out wildly. Suddenly, Xianggo summoned his dimensional gateway. After swiftly leaping through the magical door, he immediately commanded it to close, leaving nothing but a trace of swirling energy behind. Pushing his way through the distracted monsters, he quickly regrouped with Xian. The young woman was completely bewildered, wondering aloud how he had managed to bypass the solid wall of zombies without getting caught grabbing her hand. He urged her to keep moving, promising to explain the details later. He knew they had no time to waste. The undead would actively start hunting them the moment the temporary death field vanished, and the dangerous assassin was still very much alive. When she suggested they retreat to the safety of her apartment, he firmly rejected the idea, deciding instead that they needed to head directly for the time shelter. Confused by this seemingly reckless choice, she asked for his reasoning. He explained his intention to redirect the deadly murderer toward Party C. She immediately pointed out a major flaw in this plan, reminding him that the enemy leader currently had complete mind control over the assassin. As they continued their escape, the protagonist confidently replied that the psychic link was likely already broken. He recalled an old informational video, which stated that once a forced deathmatch concluded, all negative status effects affecting the killer were automatically erased. Processing this crucial detail, the young woman deduced that the brainwashing must have been cured as well. Finally, realizing that this had been his master strategy from the very beginning, praising her sharp intuition, he outlined his ultimate objectives. They would let the freed assassin unleash chaos on Party C, effectively protecting the shelter in the process. Glancing at her, he confidently reasoned that, using underhanded tactics against corrupt enemies,